Stop.
Call this meeting to order. I need a motion on approving the minutes from our last.
Also move to approve the minutes of the previous meeting.
Any discussion or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion approved. Okay. Mr. Money?
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners.
Good morning.
We did an internal audit of the budgeting processes of the Texas Animal Health Commission. We evaluated the controls implemented by the Texas Animal Health Commission regarding budget processes as of March 3rd, 2014. If you go to page 6 of the report, it lists primary objectives. One is reliability and integrity of information. Our objective was to rely on the information that was to be given to us. Compliance with policies, procedures, laws, and regulations. Any efficiency and effectiveness of operating procedures. And also safeguarding of assets. Anytime there is money involved, we always look at how the agency is safeguarding the assets of the state of Texas. Page 3 of the report, it gives the internal audit results. We were able to determine that the Commission has adequate controls and procedures in place to provide reasonable assurance that the budget is effectively established and adhered to in accordance with budgetary statutes and guidelines. The Commission has procedures to monitor budget activity in a timely manner, which is very, very important. The managers of the Commission are kept informed about the funds available for conducting operations. On page 4, lists the detailed issues and recommendations, quite a few internal control strengths that we were able to identify during the course of the internal audit. And we're happy to report that there were no deficiencies detected in the budgeting process that are significant to the objectives of the internal audit. And I'll be more than happy to entertain any questions that you may have regarding the audit.
Any questions? Mr. Rufus, I'd like to say that on behalf of the Audit Committee that all the work that you do, both of you and Robert, throughout the year has been exemplary as far as I'm concerned, as far as looking at our different areas within this operation, and done an excellent job bringing out some of all our strengths and some of our weaknesses that we've been able to fix. And so I think this is a very good indication of what you've done. I know this is over the budgeting type deal, but this is just part of it that we see. So thank you. Any questions? Okay. I think there's
Let me go ahead and move Mr.
Yes.
Chairman, I move that we approve the audit budgeting processes as discussed today.
all right. I've had a motion. Is there any comments or questions? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
We
Carried.
need a second of the motion.
I'm sorry.
Somebody is.
I need a second. I'm
I'll
sorry.
second it.
Second it, okay. All right. So moved then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I seconded the first one too. Yeah.
Morning, Chairman. We got one more item. What this is we all had approved the audit plan for this year, which we're in the process of finishing. However, as we finished up the audit of the budget process, the next major audit up was for where's the audit? All right, what we have, the next audit up was to be travel, which also falls under the finance department. And they're currently also getting, there's an external audit that the comptroller does every 4 years that they're in the process of doing. So what we have, and let me go get, because I don't see it in the book. Yeah, what we want to do is we want to amend the audit plan for this year and remove the travel audit that was approved of and replace it with a disaster recovery audit of our internal, of our computer department. And I had done up an audit, and I apologize, I'm looking here, it's not in here, but there's a substitute audit.
Do I need to go get Sally?
Yes.
So you're moving what was planned as a audit for the travel.
Yes, where we're removing it from this year's audit so that they're not overburdened with too many audits, because they just finished the budget one, they have the comptroller one, and as they're getting into the summer, they'll be doing all the final fiscal year operations. So what we're going to do is just swap it out and instead put up for internal information resources, our computer department, we are going to have the disaster recovery, which means basically how we're going to handle a situation where we lose our computer systems, what are our backups, how are we going to go through. And it's a process that we have in place. It's been audited in the past. There was a number of amendments made. So
There's basically two ways you get audited. One's internally, like Monday Rufus's group, but sometimes externally. In this case, the comptroller's office just came out of the blue and said, we're going to audit your travel section. So they're now auditing what we were proposing to audit, y'all were going to audit next year, and so we're just saying that it doesn't make sense to audit the same thing twice in a row. So we're going to switch that for disaster recovery systems. That's all that happened.
So it's getting audited, but by the
Yeah,
comptroller
we didn't know they were
outside.
going to do it when y'all
Yes,
voted last time. We didn't know that, because they're a surprise audit. They just say, we'll be there next Tuesday and we're going to look at this. And so it just doesn't make sense to do the same one twice, internal and external. That's what's going on. Because it would be repetitious.
I don't see a problem.
Chairman, if I can
Sure.
clarify a little bit. The Texas Internal Auditing Act, Government Code 2102, requires that the commission approve the audit plan, which we present each year to the commission. Now, if there's going to be a change within the audit plan, the act also requires that the commission approve that change. Sometimes in the course of doing our work, another agency like the state auditor's office or the comptroller's office might decide to do something that we have now. Instead of actually tripping over each other, doing the work, and then they'll go and do the work. Just in the interest of efficiency and effectiveness, comment that the best thing would be to make a change to the audit plan and select another audit since the comptroller's office will be looking at the post-payment audit. So basically what the management is requesting is for the commission to approve the change in the audit plan, basically replacing the travel with business continuity and disaster recovery.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the FY 2014 audit plan amendment as discussed today.
I'll second it.
All right, any discussion?
Thank you. I apologize. Clearly, because I had sent this and had it done up, and frankly, I just forgot to check the book for this particular part, so I apologize.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Carried. All right. I think that was pretty much it
No
today.
public
That's
comment,
it,
so.
yeah.
Public comments? All right. Hearing none, move for an adjournment.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome this morning. Praise the Lord for the rain. I think a lot of people got it. It was wonderful. Again, everybody, welcome to the 389th meeting. I will call the meeting to order, and I will ask for approval of the minutes of the 388th.
Mr. Chairman, Chairman, I move that we approve the minutes of the 388th Commission meeting.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. We approve the minutes of the 388th. Is there any discussion? If none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I would just like to comment that our minutes are always so well done and so in order, and the folks that do that really need something nice said about them, because they're always great, and these books we get,
Who puts the minutes together? Carol. Carol?
they're great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have you had much practice with that?
Just a little bit.
We're gonna have to let her go after this meeting, though, I'm thinking.
This
I
is
quit.
This is Carol's last. This is Carol's last commission meeting. Unless people here keep having babies, then you may have to come back.
You're right.
We really appreciate you taking this
you.
on and helping our staff. We really do.
It's been great. It's been a great ride the whole time.
Thank you very much. Dr. Ellis will give his report of the executive director.
Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I want to start off with, I'm going to deviate slightly from the normal report. You have my report in your books, but I want to introduce Ben Tran. Ben, come up here with your trophy. So, I'm really proud. The agency won the mid-sized state agency. We were the fittest agency, and to do that, 87% of our employees enrolled and logged their time, and they worked out for 10 weeks. And we do value health and wellness at the agency. We actually have some flex time where we let employees leave early or take a long lunch 3 days a week to work out. 87% of our employees were engaged in this. We won, as all the state agencies, we won the contest for the most participation. And Ben Tran here, he's in our computer section. He's the strongest guy in the room, I'm going to tell y'all right now. I'm not kidding. He works that 2 hours a day, and he was the ramrod behind making sure everyone signed up and participated. So, Ben, congratulations, show him the trophy. We've never won this before. First place, to me, having 87% of your employees do anything means we've got some teamwork going on, and so I think we're doing well, and I was proud of that, and I wanted to congratulate Ben for all you did. You want to say anything, or you all right?
Well, I can say something.
Oh, I see. All right, you got 1
Please.
minute. You got 1 minute.
You've got all the time you want.
Doctors came to me about 30 minutes ago and say I need to come up and say something. So I was kind of a little panic. I'm sorry I didn't dress up properly. But let me introduce myself. My name is Ben Tran. I work in the IT department, and beside the IT, I have an additional job, wellness coordinator. And early this year, 2 months ago, back in March, we participate in a wellness program provided by state. And in this program called the Get Fit Texas. And the requirement to complete the program is that each staff had to complete 6 weeks, minimum of 2.5 hours of activity per week. And many of our staff here in central office work out at the gym, and other inspectors from regional office, they work out in the field a lot. And one of the category requirement for the Get Fit Texas is farm work. If you complete more than 2.5 hours, then you want 1 star per week for 2.5 hours for 6 weeks. And many of our inspectors work 40 hours to 60 hours a week out in the field, so they more than qualify. But they work so much that they tire, so they don't have time to work, log in the computer. So my job was to motivate them. So every day, daily, I would send out email, remind them, and to make it less boring, I asked them to send pictures of their hunting, fishing. Hunting, fishing is also considered a wellness activity. So I have lots of pictures of personal picture from their family sending in, and I would send them out with a little story to motivate them. And the result of that, we got a lot of people participate in. And we have, at the award, we would mention that we had the highest percentage completion with all other agencies. So, and not only that, we have support from Dr. Ellis. He gave us anybody who complete the 6-week program will get additional 4-hour admin time off. So that really motivates everyone. And we were really honored that we the first place. with all the other agencies. We beat the Security Board Agency and Texas Public Utility Commission. It was
Thank you, Ben.
extortion there.
He takes it seriously. Yeah, the security board, they're our biggest rival. Anyway, thank you and congratulations. I wanted to brag on that. Y'all just hear rules sometimes. We do try and have fun while we work hard. So anyway, I get going on my report. Agency business, I think the biggest thing that we continue to see, and for some of y'all that are newer to the commission, you may wonder what's going on with all the hiring. Well, we're rebuilding the agency. We went from 200 to 125. Our new FTE cap is 161. You can see here, last meeting we were at 140. We're going to be at about 147 right now, more or less. You're going to probably see one more meeting where we continue to hire. We're not going to go back to 161, but we'll definitely get into the 150s. On our employees, which is still 25% smaller than we were in 2011, and that's right where we're going to be. But our challenge first is hiring, and Pam at HR, you can stand up, Pam. She's our HR person that actually screens the applicants and all that, works with Larissa and Roy Stanley. So for them to hire 20 people, just one after the other, and interview and screen and check credentials, it's a nonstop job. So thank you, Pam, for all you do. So now our job is to train them. I mean, it's one thing to get someone hired, then you have to really take the time. So the agency is actively engaged with our employees, and we're trying to maintain our tradition and culture and train new people. And it's a full-time job right now, but I want y'all to be aware of that. We're probably almost through hiring. Probably one more meeting where I'll come and we'll have added 5 or 6 more, and then we're going to level off in the 150s. Dr. Swartz is going to I'm going to let him give the entire El Paso TB review report, other than I'll just say that we're on track to meet the legislative mandate. The testing's almost finished, and I want to thank Andy for his leadership and all the people, probably. How many people in this room have been to El Paso in the last month? Bonnie, Russell, Laura, there's Holly, Andy, TR, no, me. Anyway, about 35 of our agencies been out there doing either mapping or testing or public information, just different things going on, but we're on track, and the next thing's for Andy to write the report, and we'll get that turned in you guys at the next commission meeting. There'll be probably some proposed rules, probably reevaluating the risk status of the El Paso County. So we're optimistic about that. I'll let Andy give you the details. The work conference, we had our manager work conference 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. Thank you, Commissioner Locke. He came and addressed our veterinarians and our supervising inspectors from the field. Thank you for coming and talking to those guys. And we've got this summer, we'll have our inspectors in twice in San Marcos. If any of you would like to come sit in, talk to them, to see what we're doing, what we're telling those guys, you're more than welcome, and Carol can accommodate you if you need a room, or just let her know she is in charge of the agenda. That's kind of her job for the rest of the summer. Amanda will be back 1st of June, and so they're swapping back out, and she's going to run those work conferences, and her and Dr. Lansford have set the agendas. But if anyone's interested in meeting our inspectors, they will all be in 2 groups, half next week and half in July. So the strategic plan is on the agenda after this. Y'all should have received the emails. You should have received hard copies. Just to sum up what is a really long document otherwise is the message that we're saying in that strategic plan is we have to maintain our existing eradication program vigilance, even though USDA is kind of leaving us a little bit as far as support. There's emerging diseases out there. We have to be nimble enough to address as new challenges. Mexico's ongoing. We've got 109 cattle in Uvalde today that they caught at the border last week, and they were pending TB and brucellosis test results. So we've got herds of cattle and horses that are out there that are not from the United States that are living in Texas. So we're going to continue to protect our livestock industries. And then just enhanced expectations of stakeholders and all the changes that are going on with agriculture in general, demographic changes, urbanization. We have to be ready to address whatever those things are at the same time we take care of our old business. That's what the strategic plan says in a nutshell, and we'll discuss that if y'all want to in a minute. The rules that are up for passage today, I've got them listed here. Quarantine dairy calf ranches, live bird market, plasmosis, veterinarians recording the origin of Mexican cattle on the health certificate. In other words, saying these are Mexican cattle I'm writing the health certificate on, and some ADT, animal ID cleanup, just language rules. No comments on any of them, not one comment. That's usually good news, but I'm just letting y'all know that those rules would appear to be non-controversial for passage from my perspective. Rules for proposal. I'm going to talk about TRIC separately in just a second, but I think we had a really good working group that came, and there are some substantive changes in there for discussion, as well as some substantive theories being kicked around about where do we go next, and I'm going to talk about TRIC separately in just a second. But you can see here there are some TRIC rules that are going to be proposed as a result of the work of the working group. We also have a couple of diseases related to new and emerging disease in the swine industry. It's a novel coronavirus, swine coronavirus, and these are viruses similar to TGE. If you know anything about hogs, it causes diarrhea and vomiting. It kills pigs. It's a national issue. It's an emerging disease born in the United States before last May. And so you have a couple of rules on there. One is basically just reinforcing the statement that we put out a couple of months ago telling veterinarians and producers in other states, don't send us pigs that have been exposed to this virus or are in a farm that's sick with it until at least 30 days after the recovery. And it's kind of intuitively, veterinarians shouldn't have done that, so we reminded them of that. This rule just reinforces that Texas does not want hogs coming from PED and novel swine coronavirus infected premises until they're no longer shedding the virus or it's limited in its risk. And this is a national disease that's where Commissioner Winters is at today. He's in a meeting in Chicago on PED, called yesterday and said, I need to go to this. But the show industry and the seed stock industry in Texas is still relatively free of this disease. The commercial folks are not. And so this rule was directed primarily to protect our show hog industry. As you know, you're moving hogs. A lot of hogs come from the Midwest, these show hogs. Basically what we were saying was if they're sick or they've been exposed, sit tight until it blows over in your herd. Don't just send them on down here and spread this virus around. It's spread around primarily manure and on trailers and on your feet and things like that. So you have a couple of rules there. The second rule just basically is making it reportable, is proposing to make it reportable. And the reason this rule was proposed was because USDA has indicated through a federal order that hadn't come out yet, but they say they're going to put it out. USDA is saying at the national level they're going to make it reportable. What's that mean to be reportable? It just means when the lab gets a positive, they tell us about it. Doesn't mean there's any action taken. There's no action taken, but we're on notice that we know where the cases are around the state. And we have other reportable diseases that are not actionable. A good example would be West Nile virus in a horse. If we have a West Nile virus infected horse, they tell us about it. We look at it and we go, okay. And that's all this would do at the time. But what we're doing is setting the agency up, if USDA follows through with their declaration of intent, which is to make it nationally reportable and then create a process similar to the trick herd plans, where we give an infected herd owner 3 years to work their way out of it by just working with their veterinarian and kind of leaving them alone other than some loose regulatory constraints. What USDA is saying is we believe that we think infected premises should work with their veterinarian to try and develop a health management plan to get rid of the disease on their farm, or at least minimize the risk of spread of the disease. If they go through with that federal order, their intent would be to have states, the Animal Health Commission in Texas, manage the process. There will be some funding available. It'll probably come through us and then be passed on to herd swine owners and veterinarians. And so that would be a whole other little section of kind of like when we did the TB testing, if y'all remember about 10 years ago, statewide. Federal money came to us and then we paid the veterinarians to do the TB testing. So we see this probably coming. They're in working group meetings right now at the national level on this, and as of last week, the USDA said they have not changed their mind, so we went ahead and this rule, a proposed rule for your consideration would be to make the novel swine coronaviruses reportable. PED is the most common one. There are a number of other viruses in this group that are out there, and so rather than just name one, we're just naming the class of viruses because they are an emerging disease threat in the United States. So that's a rule. We rewrote the first of what's going to be a lot of rewrites. We rewrote the scabies chapter. Most of our rules, most of our chapters need someone to just sit down and completely gut them and start over, to be honest. Some of them have been written 20, 30, 40 years ago. It's a huge job. And I want to thank Mary and Jean and some of our field staff. We did a good job on the scabies one. The problem with scabies, which is a mite that gets on animals, and it used to be a lot bigger problem before we had the ivermectin. You know, when you had to dip ivermectin, now it's kind of solved a lot of these problems. But where we still see problems are with show animals. 2 weeks, 1 week before the show, they come in and get a health certificate, and the vet looks at it and goes, "What's that on your back of your steer?" And it's scabies, and our rules require quarantines and withholding a time period, a timeout basically till they heal up. And so we rewrote this chapter. We updated it to include ivermectin in some of the treatments, and also just simplified it and consolidated some things. So it's a complete rewrite of that, and it was long overdue. And you'll probably see us starting to do this with some other chapters in the future. It just takes, you can't bite off more than maybe one every 6 months or a year at the most, because they are complex to try. And when you rewrite an entire chapter, you have to spend a lot of time on it. So that's the rules up for proposal, and I'll move on to animal ID. As y'all know, the rule for cattle is 7 days within change of ownership. The animal basically needs to have a tag put in or be at a slaughter plant, and so far it's working pretty well. We're continuing to work the management meeting we had with our staff last week. I'll be honest with you, we still have some challenges internally. It's not really easily monitored. When you go to a market and a guy's buying a trader, for lack of a better word, is buying cattle and charging them to 5 or 6 different numbers, it's really difficult for our staff to figure out, is that a slaughter order number, or is that just going to his cousin's house? And so we're really working through some challenges with our staff on how to monitor this. Anytime you give your staff discretion, which is what we're doing here, they have discretion and they've been told, we're not going to go crazy here, but if someone's violating our rules, we will enforce the rules. The parameters that we have are pretty lenient, but if they get outside those lenient parameters, we need to document it, and we need to move forward with compliance activities, because the intent of the rule is that breeding animals will have a tag. So we're working through, it's just human nature. Some of our folks get it, some are like, well, I'm not really sure what to do. How do I keep up with that? And to go back to what I said at the beginning, we have a lot of new employees, and so we will have some challenges with this rule, and also the trick rule, the 7 days for a trick bull to be tested for trick or go to slaughter or be resold. It's just a changing dynamic for our agency and our interaction with markets, and it's working fine, but I just want y'all to be aware that we do have some learning curves here for enforcement of a rule that's pretty loose, to be quite honest, and so that's just one of our challenges from a managerial thing. The markets, we've visited with all of them, state and federal. I will tell you, Texas was ahead of the curve. A lot of the other states are just now trying to deal with animal ID that we started 2 years ago. And good or bad, we're over it. They're not. They're going through it right now. And some of the other states are actually looking at the Texas as a leader for concepts, the 7-day rule for animal ID. There are a number of states that are thinking about that. And so I'm proud that, we went first, and we've obviously developed something that's workable. We just have to work through the kinks there. Right now, our staff has been engaging with the feeder industry across the state and seeing if some of those guys want to be tagging facilities, and to be basically, if you're going to receive untagged adult cattle from across the state line, or if you're going to receive within the state of Texas cattle that are going to go on feed that are adults, not feeders, adult cattle, it's in your best interest to be able to put a tag in their ear to comply with both the state rule and the federal rule, which are just a little different. So I think we have about 10 feedlots, Chairman, that have signed up for this. Some other ones thinking about it. If they change their mind, we can get them signed up in a day or two. But basically, if you're a tagging facility, if y'all remember, most of our markets are, it just says, all right, you're going to give me tags, and I promise if I use these tags on any animals, I'll follow the rules, which are, I got to write down, correlate back tag to your tag, and keep some records and give them to you if you ask for them. That's basically how simple it is. It's working fine, but we've worked through the markets. We're almost finished with the feedlots, and the next the veterinarians. The veterinarians are going to be a challenge just because record keeping and ID, and we're going to have a lot of issues with vets. We'll work through it, but they're going to go last, and so that's all I'll say about that. As a veterinarian, I'll just say it's a challenge, you know, to do I put the flat tag 98 on the deal, or do I put the 840 15-digit code? And so, you know, our challenge with everyone is to get to electronic capture of data so that we can move into the next generation of data capture. I'll talk now specifically about trichomoniasis. And we had the working group, and I want to thank, there were 3 commissioners there, Commissioner Locke, Leathers, and Vickers. It was a very good meeting. I think you're seeing a transition in the trick program from the first, going into our 5th year now, and basically from the first 4 or 5 years just trying to figure it out, outreach, and after 4 or 5 years we're starting to identify some of the issues that are real game changers or deal breakers for an effective program to move to the next step. And the decision to move to the next step will be the cattle industry's decision. This is a voluntary program. We're just traffic cop. We're the guy that's helping them across the street, so to speak, but we want the industry to have full ownership and feel like this is an inclusive program. And so what you see here for y'all today are a couple of what I consider fairly significant rule proposals that have been kicked around the last 2 or 3 years, and the group didn't want to do it. And this year they said, we're ready. And the first 2 there are, one's related to stray bulls. So if your neighbor's bull gets into your pasture and it keeps getting in there, and so after the 5th time you go have it tested for trick and it's positive, well, yeah, obviously you're going to have to test, but now this rule proposal would say the neighbor has to test the pasture that bull came out of, not all his cattle. But if that bull keeps jumping out of the pasture across the fence and it's got trick, then that fella's got to test his herd as well. This is a significant change, and it's the next little baby step towards just making sure, you know, the program is a little tighter than it has been. That's a rule proposal, so both folks would have to test once, and if the rest of their bulls are negative, we're going to let them go, because they could each blame each other. You could say, well, the neighbor's bull had it, but he hadn't been here but a week, and he didn't breed my cows. Or you could say, well, yeah, or the neighbor could say, yeah, my bull got over there, but his bulls have tricks, so it's not my fault. My bull caught it from his cow. So we're going to basically take a look at both pastures, not all their cattle, unless it's unless they just say, well, I move them around. If they say that, epidemiologically, we will test whatever's appropriate. But this is a significant change. This is a rule proposal that has been rejected the last 2 years, and this time the group said, let's move forward with it. And Commissioner Locke, at the end, I'll give you the opportunity to say anything you want to say about this as well. The second one, which is also a significant change for trick, is, as y'all know, we allow you to sell an untested bull, and someone else can buy it and test it within 30 days. They agree to keep it away from female cattle, and they agree to get it tested within 30 days. We have a permit and a process and markets. This rule proposal would, for the first time, say, all right, you dropped a bull off the market, another guy bought it, went and had it tested, and it's positive, you're going to have to test. Before that, there was nothing. There was no requirement, and even though it's obviously your bull, and he hasn't been with other cows. And so this rule proposal would just say, you sell a bull and someone else tests it besides you, and it's positive, you still got to test the epidemiologically linked group, because that's, you know, that's intuitive that they're the ones. That's where the bull came from. Because the folks that buy an untested bull promise in writing they won't put it with cattle until they get it tested. So if they didn't put it with cattle and test positive, it had it when they bought it. So that's the logic there. But those two rules are changes in the philosophy of the program, slightly moving just a little more beyond just a really complete voluntary program. So the rest of these are a little more minor. The certified free herds, we have about 10 herds, I believe, in this process right now. And basically, we're just at the request of another state vet, which made complete sense. He said, I will like your program a lot more if you would just make sure they have good fences. And so there will be the proposal is to include language that says, if you're going to be a certified free herd, you got to have good fences so your bulls don't jump out and become exposed from another pasture. Another very important rule that I think I'm proud of this concept is Texas is the only state that has this, I believe, is we've got about 10 herds in what we call extended 3-year herd plans. And these are big ranches, primarily big ranches with 100, 200 more bulls, and they have trick. And basically what we're saying is we're not going to come in and make you test them twice, 30 days apart, and get released, because the truth is you got to deal with your female cattle. So we give them a 3-year herd plan concept to work with their veterinarian to manage their way out of the disease in the herd, which includes culling bulls, culling cattle, moving them around, palpating them. The vaccination may be part of it. But what we realized is we didn't have an exit strategy. So we've got some herds that have made huge progress, but they're not quite finished and the 3 years is up. We also have some herds that are enrolled in this that are not making any progress at all. They're not keeping up with them. They're getting out. They're moving around. They've still got trick. So this proposed rule basically would give the commission the authority to, one, extend the 3-year herd plan if the ranch is trying and they're making progress. And it would also say you're out. You're not making any progress. We want to revert to a normal quarantine, which is you got to have 2 negative tests to release your herd, and then they can start over or whatever. But it just gives us an exit strategy from some of these big ranches. Most of them, I would say that I think there's only 1 or 2 that are not doing well. Most of them are making good progress, but there are a couple that just, for whatever reason, they're not. So that's what that rule is. A few entry requirement things. One is really a statement more than realities that the commission would accept bulls from certified free herds in other states. It's a new concept. There's only 2 other states that even have it, Colorado and Oklahoma. Colorado has no bulls enrolled. Oklahoma just has a couple. But I think the value of this is if the commission proposes to accept bulls from other states, and those states will probably reciprocate. And we have some folks in the certification process that this would be of a value. The last bullet point there is if we realized we didn't clearly define in our rules what the value of being a certified free herd for trick was, and it's basically you test so many times, you get your certification, then you can sell a bull without having to test it right there on the spot. It's the same as for certified free TB or brucellosis, and so we put into language what's the point, and so we've clarified that as well. So there are the lessons that were taken away from the committee were that there's going to eventually need to be some addressing of female cattle, because female cattle give it to the bulls and the bulls give it to the cows, so it's a circle. And a lot of discussion about should a neighbor have to test. Right now, if a fence line, if your neighbor has trick, fence line adjacent, we just notify you your neighbor has trick. There is a growing interest in requiring 1 negative test of the guy across the fence, because you keep hearing these stories, well, my neighbor's bull keeps jumping in and out. It's got to be the problem. It kind of goes back to what I said before, the rule you are going to pass. The rule you're going to propose is the bull's caught in your pasture. The other rule, this concept is, well, I can't ever catch him. He keeps going back and forth, but I know that's the problem. So the direction of the stakeholders are there, the organizations involved, we go back and have internal discussions. If there's summer meetings, there are fall meetings. There's going to be national discussion at the U.S. Animal Health in the fall, and I would encourage some of you all to go to those meetings. And it's possible there will be another working group later this fall, but there's a lot of discussion about really looking at neighbors in general and also female cattle. And we also asked the veterinarians on the group to go back and work on a template or a Bible, so to speak, of accepted biosecurity practices. 1, how do I keep from getting trick? And 2, what do I do and my vet do to help me free my herd up? And we're going to start to work on that, and those could be the basis for more stringent rules on down the line. First, we'll just start saying these are good ideas. After we use them in the state for a while and realize these are good ideas, they could be the basis for the working group to say, all right, this is such a good idea, it ought to be a rule. So that's kind of the way they went. Coleman, I'll let you say anything if you want, but so you do have rules for proposal, but I'm telling y'all there may be some more rules coming. But we want the industry groups to decide whether it's a good idea. It's not coming from the staff. It would come from the cattle industry of Texas. So,
I think you covered it very well. I'll just point out, like you said, at the end of the meeting, we ask our industry groups to go home and talk about it and check with their folks and kick it around, bring it back to us, and we probably get back together after USAHA this fall. And that's kind of where we are on the new stuff.
thank you. There's the best thing that I see happening in a way is there finally has become a national dialogue forum at both U.S. Animal Health and at NIAA, the National Institute of Animal Ag. That's in the spring, USHA is in the fall, where all the state vets come together. There were 30 of us in Omaha at NIAA. At U.S. Animal Health, there'd be 40 there. And then USDA's there, and industry. USDA is not looking to get involved in the trick program from a rulemaking. They are interested in getting involved from a lab consistency standpoint, which is greatly needed, is to try and bring the labs. The labs are kind of freewheeling it out there. They're all doing, in their mind, a really good job, and I'm not doubting them, but there's inconsistency between labs. as to what tests they run and how they run it. And so you can get some nuances. For the most part, they're all the same, but you get these little nuances. This lab's more sensitive, this one's more specific. And so USDA is interested in working on consistency of testing to make it not so confusing. There's also a lot of dialogue between the states about consistency of entry rules, and you might see a rule proposed in the future from Texas just to be a good team player. It won't be anything significant, but for example, an example might be that the rule would be to reconsider accepting virgin bulls from out of state. Right now, we basically don't do that, and I think the consensus is going to be 18 months. Right now, our rule says they're over 12 months, they got to have a test, and most of the states are, there's some that want 24, some that want 18. There's 3 that had the 12 months like us, and I think you're going to see everyone agree, let's just pick 18 and do it the same way so our producers in the United States are not confused and our vets are not confused. So you could see something like that, and it's not a deal breaker to me, because at the end of the day, if you're buying an untested bull, whether it's a virgin or whatever, you're buying it, that's your choice. You're buying it at your own risk, and it still might have a problem. So there's good ideas. That goes back to that Bible of biosecurity practices. We'll give folks examples of things they should consider to help keep them out of that. So in other words, you might still want to have a test even though you're buying a quote-unquote virgin. That's pretty much on trick. The rest of Commissioner Leathers or Vickers, y'all were there. If y'all have anything you'd like to say. I thought it was a good working group, and I'm most excited that everyone kind of acknowledges that it's working well, which is a reflection of y'all's decision making and our staff's ability to work with producers. And 2 is everyone's kind of thinking about what's next, because we're not going to ever eradicate it the way it is now. It's a good control program, and so that'll be the debate. How stringent, how regulatory do you want to make this? And we're going to go slow from my perspective, but whatever the industry wants, we'll do it. So move on then to equine pyroplasmosis. We also had a working group since the last meeting on pyro, and thanks. Commissioner Leathers led that working group, and Commissioner Vickers was there. It was really focused on just the racing industry. It was really not, the trick working group, you come in with a long list of ideas, really. Oh, we're going to talk about this rule. The pyro working group was more informational in nature, and the racing industry just wanted to know what was going on. They would like us to stop requiring a test just because they don't want to pay $50 for a test. I'm talking about some of the folks, not all of them. But the truth is, after you sat through the meeting, Dr. Swartz did a good job of presenting information. We have a foreign animal disease in Texas in our racing industry, quarter horse racing industry. We've had 2 more infected horses found since the meeting. We've had 4, I think, this year. It's not acceptable at the national level. Texas has got to clean itself up. And so, long story short, after a lot of information discussion, there was no change to the existing, no discussion really, the consensus was, yeah, racehorses in Texas need to have a test because we have pyro. There was some discussion, and it'll be later this summer. I'll work with Commissioner Leathers and any of the rest of y'all that are interested. There may be some discussion about actually enhancing the testing requirement beyond sanctioned tracks to include unsanctioned tracks. And I think Commissioner Leathers asked the question, appropriate question, if we don't address unsanctioned racetracks, will we ever get rid of pyroplasmosis in Texas? And the answer is probably no. This goes back to Mexico. That's where the disease comes from. It's a blood-borne disease, and then these racehorses mainly needled, by poor animal husbandry, needles, blood transfer between these horses, and those ones running on Sunday afternoon are probably getting a little bit different level of management handling than ones at Lone Star and Sam Houston or Thomas. So that's going to be the discussion as whether to propose a rule actually enhancing the testing requirement for not only horses going to a sanctioned track, but to unsanctioned track and possibly some of the larger training facilities, because really the large training facilities have a track and they do a lot of running out there in the back. Some of these have 100, 200 race horses. Some of them are right down there in Laredo and then right on the border. And so the easy thing is, yeah, it's a good idea. A little harder is how do we manage that with the safety issues and just coordination with other state agencies. But I would not be surprised if you don't see a proposal for this at the next meeting. Commissioner Leathers, I'll let you say anything you'd like at this time, but that dialogue is going to happen this next couple of months.
I can't really add anything to it other than it's a work in progress, and we're going to have to figure out the best way to go about it. And the big problem is going to be the safety, as you said, and getting other agencies involved, because it's not something that we can do by ourselves down on the border.
unsanctioned racing is illegal and violates a lot of rules, and there's also just other law violations that go on there. So we just got to think through this. I mean, and it's possible you could propose the rule and pass it, and we continue to try and figure out how to do it. You could put it on notice, this is not legal, but slowly implement it so we get the concurrence of other state agencies. The Racing Commission meets in the same room, about the same schedule as y'all do, and they're interested in it. They're very interested in this as well because they sanction racing, so they don't like unsanctioned racing. And what I'm talking about is where there's gambling, you know, and so it's the disease part is really a no-brainer, but the no-brainer part stops when you say, all right, who's going over there to do this? And that's where we have to think through our strategy. But I'll get with Commissioner Leathers on that, and Vickers as well.
One thing I would like to emphasize is when we had that working group meeting, I really felt like there was some opposition from the sanctioned track. But by the time we got through with the meeting and they knew all the facts, there was zero opposition to it, other than maybe one individual.
Right, and the racing industry in Texas is, from my perception, really challenged financially. They're really struggling. It has nothing to do with our test requirement. I did get an email from one of those folks the other day said, we still wish you'd quit. We still want to do it. Well, that's our challenge, is to explain ourselves, provide information, and as I said, we've had 2 new infected. Is it 2 horses, Andy, or 2?
Well, one since the meeting.
So since the meeting, we've continued to find positives in the racing industry. So I think the decision, we'll just revisit this from time to time, but don't be surprised if you don't see some kind of rule at the next meeting y'all hold. Commissioner Keysar, do you have a, okay, I thought you raised your hand.
How are we with, oh, go ahead.
Dr. Ellis, is the pyro problem, are you finding it throughout North Texas or the Panhandle, or is it pretty much contained down south?
Well, the racing issue is different than the South Texas. They're 2 separate populations. In South Texas, we have some counties where the climate is compatible for the ticks to live in the pasture long enough that they can get a population of ticks with the Babesia in their tick family, and then they bite horses and spread it. So geographically, the tick spread pyro is only in South Texas. I'm going to talk about that in a second. The racehorse pyro is wherever they go. I mean, one of the Texas horses left Lone Star, and they found it positive in Louisiana. So it's wherever a racehorse goes. And I would say for quarter horse racing in general, the sanctioned circuit is going to be New Mexico, Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana. The unsanctioned horses are all over the United States for the racehorse part. You also obviously have got old breeding horse. You've got old fillies or mares that ran. They're now breed animals, and they're 10 years old, and they still got pyro, and we don't really have a surveillance system to catch those horses. And so racehorsing is not geographic. The tick population is. So to talk about the tick issue, there will be another county test. You know, I asked the epidemiologist to present me with the information. Where do we go next? We've had 2 county tests in Kleberg and Kennedy. Is that right? Both of them had pyro. We can't stop until we find a ring of negative counties geographically and then move south. We're certain. I mean, I've got some other states that are asking what counties are left, and I think off the top of my head, we know we got to do Cameron, Hidalgo, Willacy. We're going to start Brooks. This is Dr. Vickers' home county. We possibly could end up in Starr or even Webb or in Nueces, depending upon the situation. We've got to find a negative perimeter of counties where the ticks have not marched, where the freeze line, basically, right. You're talking about a place where it never freezes or doesn't freeze enough to actually knock that population back. And then we're going to have to work our way back. So the next county we're going to do is Brooks, which is where Dr. Vickers lives, and it's adjacent to Kleberg. It's kind of an interesting county. One side of it's large ranches. The other side's going to be a little smaller. It's not going to be as hard of it's not going to be near as much logistical problems as Kleberg, not as many horses, and a lot of them are on big ranches where you just get all your horses up and do it some evening or whatever. We'll work through that. That's going to start this summer, so I have accepted the recommendation of our EPIs that this is a high-risk county for pyroplasmosis, which triggers the mechanism to do a county test. We'll have public meetings within the next month. We're going to we've got to look at our workforce. I think we're going to try and start in June. It may be July now. But again, with the heat the way it is, most of these we can do them in the evenings or the mornings. It's not going to be like a massive task force where we're testing horses all day long. We'll work selectively with owners. Some of the folks may use their own veterinarians. Dr. Vickers, I think, wants to test his own horses, right? Yeah. So, but I don't know if you'd like to say anything about that, but that's our next county. We're hoping to find a negative county. If we don't find negative counties, we're just going to have to grind through this one at a time. It may take us 10 years with our resources, and we know we're going to find positives when we get down there around Brownsville, McAllen, and those counties are going to be extremely difficult. Logistically, there's a lot of little ones and twos, a lot of people, a lot of issues with the Mexican border. We don't have a lot of staff down there, and so truthfully, I'm kind of putting that off. We're going to work on the negative perimeter and then work our way through, and hopefully we'll have a time when we're not doing things like El Paso TV and other things that are just really kind of sucking our energy as a small agency. But that's on the books. We're going to start this summer. We should be through within a month. When we get started within a month or so, we'll know the results. We'll definitely have this finished before your next commission meeting. Commissioner, if you want to say anything.
I was going to tell you, I'm going to call Dr. Miller. We have a monthly Border Patrol Rancher Partnership meeting the last Thursday of every month, and that'd be a good time for him to come down and tell everybody.
Brody Miller's the new regional vet in Beeville, took Dr. Lancer's place when he moved up here. And so
I'm going to get with him.
That'd
He
be
called
fantastic.
me. Yeah.
We want to come. We're going to also, we've already talked personally to every veterinarian that we believe might practice. I think there's 8 or 9, and I know, so I don't know if we're going to have a vet meeting, but Dr. Miller has talked to every one of them, so they're all in the loop, and it should be just like the last one. The testing's going to, the lab, it's going to be free, basically. You're just going to have to catch your horses, and so go from there. One negative test, so that's Pyro. Brucellosis, just mentioned real briefly, we're just rocking and rolling with the new surveillance, which is there's only 2 slaughter plants testing for brucellosis, LNH and Lone Star. We're having a lot of problems with the traceability. It's just kind of when the feds backed off, they relaxed. The slaughter plants have kind of gotten a little bit loosey-goosey on the collection, and we've had some traces. Louisiana had 2 reactors the other day, and we're having some traceability issues. So we're going to have to continue to get USDA and our people to work closely with these major slaughter plants still collecting. It's not their fault. It's just the psychology of brucellosis at the national level is kind of influenced, in my opinion, the tightness of the program. But this is still a really important. Program in the surveillance, and we're continuing to find positives, reactor level titers, and just like I said, with Mexican cattle out there in West Texas, Lone Star and LNH, if someone catches some wild cattle and takes them to one of those plants, we're still going to get a brucellosis test. So it's really important to us. And y'all have seen the news. Yellowstone area continues to struggle with elk populations of brucellosis. They found a new population that they didn't know had elk brucellosis even farther away from the Yellowstone area. And so, I'm comfortable that the rule that y'all passed last year is still the right thing to do. There's not really been any issues. If someone's bringing in breeding cattle from up that way, they have to get an entry permit, and we'll test them at no charge after they've been here a while, and it's the right thing to do. And I'm not aware of any issues right now with that. But I just wanted to say something about brucellosis. Authorized personnel rule. This is the new rule. It was legislation, and then y'all passed a rule basically telling veterinarians, hey, if you're going to do work in our programs, we're going to credential you, basically. And we grandfathered in everyone that was in the brucellosis, had brucellosis approved status. There's 2,000 large and mixed practitioners that had brucellosis approved status, and what we're going to work through there is just changing their certification from brucellosis approved, just generally authorized. There's another 1,000 large animal vets on the paper the USDA says are large animal that are not in our program, and I think we're going to find some of those guys probably should have been. So I want to introduce Dr. Susan Culp. Susan, stand up. We hired her March 1st. This is her job, is to manage this program. We'll talk to all the vets, the continuing education, work with the vet licensing board on all the issues there with CEUs. If they take our classes, they get credit for their licensing, which a veterinarian in Texas has to have 17 hours a year of continuing education. So we're working, our partnerships on this are the vet board, USDA, and the Animal Health Commission. We're a 3-man team on working with veterinarians to ensure that they're properly informed and they know what's going on. If they're going to trick test a bull, they know it needs a test chart. They know it needs official ID. They know where they've got to send it to an official lab. Those kinds of things. So the focus will be on, this summer, we're going to start with June. You're going to send out 1,000 letters in June. In July, another 1,000 letters to veterinarians that are on our books and just say, hey, do you want to be authorized instead of brucellosis approved? All they've got to do is send the form back. Then in August, I guess, the 1,000 that we know have told USDA, I'm a large animal practitioner, but they're not in our program, we'll contact them and say, you're not authorized. If you want to be authorized, you need to give us a call, and you can come to our regional office, come to one of our vet conventions, or we'll have some other trainings where we're training. It's a 4-hour class, and it's free, and they get 4 hours continuing education to take it, so it shouldn't be a hard thing. And then we'll probably, after we get this rolling, Dr. Vickers, come back in a year or two and start to talk about continuing education, and just say, hey, if you want to continue to be authorized, you need 1 hour or 3 hours, because something could have changed, and we'll put those online, and we'll also hold classes on that. But we've just got to get everybody signed up. From a legal standpoint, we've got to get everyone signed up before we can go to the next step. So that's where we're at with that, and Dr. Culp is going to be great at it. With that same legislation, beyond the veterinarians, is the training for cervid herd owners that want to take brain stems out. And we're going to work with the Exotic Wildlife Association this summer, as well as Texas Deer Association. Dr. Culp is already coordinating with those entities to do some initial training for non-veterinarians to take the brain stem out so they can get credit for surveillance in our CWD inventory programs. That's going to be a whole little deal. And then after September 1, there will be a veterinary technician category, which is kind of like a registered nurse for veterinarians. And so we'll begin to work with what we think we would probably want to do. If you're going to be a registered vet tech in Texas, maybe need 1 hour overview, who's the Animal Health Commission, because who ends up filling the paperwork out a lot of times? The vet techs do. So we'll probably work on that, but that's the third. So we're working with vets, then we'll get the deer training program going, then we'll work with vet techs, down the road. And it's a long-term logistical thing. Just dealing with 3,000 people in the state of Texas is going to be a long job, and at some point Dr. Culp's going to probably need some help, but we're just starting with her right now, and we'll move up the line. Also been working with the vet school. We've got the students are going to get authorized coming out of school, so that'll be easy to do. Cattle fever tick program, I'm getting down to the end of my presentation here. The numbers are still low. If it goes to raining and the grass starts growing, the numbers will come back up. The ticks are a predictive value for tick infestation is how much cover they have to lay around in the shade until they can jump on a deer or a cow. And so when there's not a lot of grass, they die. They get hot and they die. So there's a lot of grass. So we get a lot of rain in South Texas. You'll see those numbers come up and down. They're at a bottom right now. They're about as low as they've ever been in the last 20 years. You can see I put a little map in there. I don't remember now. We're like at 20 infested premises. We were at almost 200 5 years ago, but very few in the free zone. And the ones that are in the free zone are right across the highway from the infested zone, and they're deer related primarily. We've got one blanket left. We anticipate releasing that last blanket quarantine late this fall. We want to go through the hunting season, do some more deer surveillance, but the Starr County blanket will probably be released, and that'll be good news for those folks. As far as the regulations and rules, we've been working with Dr. Swartz and Lansford and myself. We're down in Laredo working with the USDA fever tick staff on implementation of Animal Health Commission rules related to ID and related to pinning your cattle. And I think that's going to be on track to start in June. Every producer my understanding is every producer in the zone has been talked to personally at this time. The vaccine is going to probably be ready to go after Labor Day. We thought it was going to be ready to go before Labor Day, but they got down to the last test, which was to confirm the withdrawal period, and they realized that some of the research was done, and they gave the shot intramuscular instead of sub-Q. And so luckily the company that, which means if you give it intramuscular, it's in the meat, and so they were finding some little residues of the adjuvant, which is an oil. It's kind of like vinegar and oil. The oil is the adjuvant, and the vinegar would be the antigen. And so they got to go back, but the company that's making the vaccine actually had on hand some more data to prove that if you give it sub-Q, you don't have a withdrawal time that's going to be really long, and so they're evaluating that. We think by this summer we'll be through with everything, and I'm still looking for beginning this fall to start to vaccinate for the first time, but truthfully it's kind of out of our hands. There's one last safety study where they just have to give some cattle a shot. You look at them every day for about 90 days to make sure they don't get a big swelling on their neck. And it's not an efficacy, it's just to make sure they don't fall over from a heart attack or have a knot on their neck. And that didn't happen in the trials at the research station, so we don't think it'll happen in the pastures. That's going to start probably any day now, and then when we get the evaluation of the withholding period, then we'll be ready this fall. The vaccine's ready. They're already making it in the United States, and so I'm optimistic, but just little things just keep pushing it back. So we're working on that. I'll finish up here with a couple things on the last page. As I said, I'm going to let Andy talk about the El Paso process, but again, thanks to him and all of our staff for their hard work there. At our work conference last week, whenever Coleman, you were there, and I told our staff again, our #1 priority is TB. We've got to do all these new things, pigs and horses and chickens and all these things, but tuberculosis is the biggest threat to us because it's an eradication program, and Mexico is right on our doorstep, and it's a trade issue, and with all the feeder cattle we get in, we have a really important job to present an image that Texas is a good program, and we're watching for it, and our animals are TB free. And so with that said, we will be working on a new blood test. The IDEX company has a new blood test, and I've had a preliminary visit with Chairman Rallis and some others. We're going to be looking for some feeder cattle to try and draw some blood out of and actually follow them all the way to slaughter to make sure it's specific. In other words, if it says it's negative, it's really negative, and the only way to do that is look at it and slaughter. If it says it's positive, now they're really positive when you get to slaughter and you see a lesion. So there's some money, funding, USDA has some funding to help us with that, and the company's ready to go. So we're going to be working on a test which would be a game changer in a way. If it turns out to be a good test, it could be a game changer for at least for these Mexican cattle coming in. If you can draw a blood sample on them and screen out the ones most likely to have TB, that would be huge. So we're going to help validate that test in the next few months. Chronic wasting disease. I think Andy's also got some information. The good news is the hunting season was over, and we didn't find any more CWD in the hunter kills from this last season, from November to January, whenever they were really looking for mule deer samples. That doesn't mean it's not out there. It just means it didn't spread and it's not rampant. But the chronic wasting disease is a permanent program. We're going to have those zones from now on. You can't prove a negative, for many, many years. So if we went 20 years and never found a positive, could you still say there's not CWD in mule deer? And the risk of introduction to the rest of the state's white-tailed industry is so huge, I just don't see anyone wanting to take any chances. But it is good news. We're going to do more of this testing next year. We're going to take more of a leadership role as an agency, enhance, expand our surveillance stations, and continue to work very closely with Parks and Wildlife to do a better job of looking for chronic wasting disease in West Texas. Commissioner Rivers.
I had a question. Were we involved in that decision to kill all those deer this last week down in Orange Grove? There's about 200 of them. Were y'all aware of that?
So the short answer is yes. The long answer is really our involvement is twofold only. They asked for an epidemiological evaluation for disease risk, which was a legislative bill that was passed in the last session. It says the Animal Health Commission will help Parks and Wildlife evaluate disease risks. The second part of that is they routinely use our hold order authority to stop movements. Parks and Wildlife doesn't, as I understand, doesn't have the authority to quarantine. So with cause, and I like it in writing, I don't like them just calling on the phone. With cause, we will restrict movements while they're in an investigation, and Dr. Swartz is our primary lead, and he works with them very closely on evaluation of these herds. Beyond that, it's under a federal investigation, state investigation. They don't give us a whole lot of the details, so we were involved, but only as far as epidemiology and only as far as we restricted the movement while Parks and Wildlife and law enforcement officials did all the things they wanted to do. And if they said turn them loose, we'd turn them loose. So, does that answer your question?
I know a couple of years ago we had this issue where the press got a hold of some of these situations where they went in and killed all these deer down there where people were not following the regulations for pen-raised deer, and it caused such a big outcry. It seemed like we were involved to the point that they needed to kind of work with us before they go in there and
we're involved.
And euthanize all these deer.
Well, we do have involvement prior to the decision to euthanize them, if that's what you.
This was a case. This guy was convicted.
Not always, but usually.
Yeah, this guy was a convicted felon, and had this deer herd, and he let a guy shoot a big deer in the pen. Y'all probably know all about it, but and then they went in and cut the heads off of all of them.
Now, and Andy may want to talk. I'm personally not involved with this at all.
Yeah,
other than I
I
know
was just
Andy
curious,
would be.
you know.
But yes, to answer your question, we work closely with
Yeah.
Parks and Wildlife.
Okay.
Yes,
The ultimate decision is never ours.
right. And we've offered to help them with the euthanasia, and that's a whole nother thing. They're in the process of hiring a veterinarian themselves right now. Andy was allowed to help interview, and so we appreciate the partnership there, and we have a good working relationship with those guys.
They're telling me they've got equipment now to run them through a chute with a bolt gun instead of having to shoot them and stuff.
I don't
know.
So I'll finish by just saying 2 waivers. One was accepted, one was denied. One was a show animal going to a stock show, and the animal was treated. It was tested negative for the mite, and we allowed it to go on to the show even though it hadn't quite technically met the definition of, I think it was 14 days after treatment. And that was one of the reasons we rewrote this chapter is with ivermectin, the old rules were reflecting dipping, which is a different effectiveness. And then the other one was on a slaughter horse owner that was taking horses to Mexico, just said, would y'all waive requiring a Coggins test on all my horses forever? Well, because I want to go to Mexico with them, and we just said no. And the reason we say no to that is mainly you don't rather really go into Mexico till they go across that river because the Mexicans can reject them. The slaughter owner can turn around, change his mind, and so we're just not going to let them come in like that. And those are the low-end horses to begin with, which are more likely to be diseased, to be quite honest. So that was it. I always am going to try and just put a few bullets down here at the bottom of possible rule ideas. As always, if we did anything, we would be in close communication with the commissioner for those rules. If you guys have rules or ideas, talk to me. We can literally only do 4 or 5 at a time. They're just so hard to do it right. You can write a rule quickly, but to do it right and not have typos and not say something that's not correct, it just takes a lot of staff time and we're limited. But you can see here some of the ideas that we have for possible rules coming up next time. And I want to finish here by thanking Carol Pavonka. I'm not going to cry today, Carol, but I probably will. But Carol and I and Andy, at one time we were all in the Rockdale office. We go way back. And, thank you for your service. And I know you're happy to retire, but we're going to miss you.
I'm going to miss y'all too.
That's in my report, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. And as commissioners, we all feel the same way as
Thank
Dr.
you.
Ellis.
Thank you very much.
We really do. You'll still be part of the family.
Yes,
Right?
definitely.
You
Only
can
now
come
I'm
back
gonna call you
anytime.
Ernie.
Oh, I've been wanting you to call me Ernie forever. Are there any questions for Dr. Ellis? If none, could I have a motion to approve the actions?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the actions of the Executive Director for the period from January the 15th, 2014 through May 13th, 2015.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. We approve item 3 of our agenda. Is there any further discussion? If none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Could I say a couple words prior to discussing item 4? And I guess with a question, you weren't going to go through all this, Dr. Ellis, were you? In my opinion, we've had it.
Do anything other than ask you all if you have any questions.
We've looked fantastic. Then I will turn it back over to you. I mean, this is something we've looked at. It's a sometimes, as we all know, these strategic plans are a necessary evil of every entity, and our guys do a lot of hard work on this. And in the future, if something comes up in your respective fields, it can be brought up the next time we work on this document. But with that, if you have any questions, and Dr. Ellis, I'll turn it over to you.
I'll just say again that I don't know how many pages are in this document.
50.
This is the first half, it's just 50, it's not the work measures part. Okay, it's a 50-page book report that we do every 2 years. And as y'all know, I've been talking to y'all by email about ideas and concepts, and here's a draft, and take a look at it and all those things. But basically the major points here is we're going to continue, the agency will continue to fight the eradication programs that we always have. We'll continue to always be ready to address emerging diseases like the swine coronavirus. We're going to continue to strengthen our ability to protect ourselves from Mexico and the animal health issues there. And then we're going to try and meet the expectations of our stakeholders and listen to them, and whatever thing they would like to do, like a trick voluntary program, we'll be ready to serve at the request of the industries that we work with. So that's what the 50 pages says in a format that's dictated by the state of Texas. We don't really get to pick how it goes. Sometimes it repeats itself, but that's what we were trying to say in there. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the 2015 through 2019 agency strategic plan as discussed today.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. We approve the 2015 to 2019 agency, the strategic plan. Is there any discussion? None, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Dr. Varner is not here. He called me Friday, got called to Washington, D.C. at the last moment. One's on the PED, the swine disease, and they've just got some continuing struggles with their reorganization, and they're asking him to come up there and help them with some stuff. So he's not here.
Okay. So we can't blame him for anything today. Or we can,
Well, we
yes.
can.
We can
Yes.
talk about him, yeah.
They do.
Dr. Schwartz? Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. So I think my report is under tab 5 in your book there. So, of course, at midnight last night, I found some typos. I apologize for that. It's too late to change them. So, as Dr. Ellis said, tuberculosis is our #1 priority still. I think it's one of the biggest disease threats to our cattle population. And so I always start off my report by talking about tuberculosis. So, going back last calendar year 2013, we had 15 cases of bovine tuberculosis. So that's 15 animals that were confirmed to have tuberculosis. All of those were found through slaughter inspection. We did trace backs on all of those animals, tested adjacents, and determined if there was any disease spread. 13 of those 15 animals traced back to Mexico. I believe 12 or 13 of them actually had Mexico origin tags. The other ones were in hand-branded lots at the feed yard. So we felt certain that they traced back to Mexico. So that left us with 2 other cases. So one of those 2 cases was most likely a knockout from a feed yard. We don't know for sure because no ID was recorded at slaughter. It didn't have a back tag or an ear tag, and the owner's records were not sufficient to lead us back to a herd of origin or even know where that animal came from. He did buy some knockouts from feed yards, and also we think that's probably where it came from. USDA does some analysis of the tissues they got, and by the sex of that tissue, they knew it was a male. And they said the breed, they did some breed analysis, but we really don't put much stock in that to try to determine, by looking at the tissue, what the phenotype of that animal is. So we just didn't put a lot of stock in that. We did a lot of investigating in that, and this individual, this consigner, is one of the compliance actions that Gene will talk to you about later. So we did take some action against that individual for not having the proper records to help us with our investigation. So the 15th case, or the last case I want to talk about, tuberculosis, it was a domestic cow that was killed at slaughter. I talked to you about it at a previous meeting. We did have a back tag and ear tag recorded on that animal, and we traced back to a sold out herd in Van Zandt County. The individual said he had bought the cow about a year before, but we could never find where he bought it. He told us which markets he bought at, and we ran the tag through every database we had. We just could never find where he actually bought it. We tested all of his cattle. He had 13 units of cattle. We tested all of them, tested his neighboring cattle, didn't find tuberculosis. We traced back on that tag that was in the cow with lesion. It was a Kappa vaccine tag that was put in 12 years ago, and we went all the way back to that herd of origin and tested that individual's cattle and did not find tuberculosis. So we think somewhere between that herd of birth and where she was found with TB at slaughter, she obviously was exposed to TB. We just don't know where. Did a lot of investigating there. It was kind of frustrating to not find that smoking gun, but we do the best we can. And these are each of these cases. I mean, as you can see, just a number on paper, 15 cases, but each of them takes an extensive amount of investigation, and we're still tracing, of the animals that left that San Angelo ranch. still finding those animals and testing those or deal with those. It's a long, drawn-out process, but I think it's worthwhile to spend the agency's time and effort to try to find the TB that's spread. The good news is that we've had no new cases of tuberculosis this calendar year, so we haven't had any slaughter lesion animals at all this year. So I'm not sure the explanation for that, other than we see some cycles in cattle coming from Mexico, and depending on the price and the weather and all. So I think when we get a high demand for feeder cattle on our side of the border, they start scrounging around in the Itos and everywhere in Mexico to try to find enough animals to fill those orders. And I think that's when they pick up the TB problem, or the TB infected animals. Going on to the next topic is I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the El Paso bovine tuberculosis risk assessment. We talked about this at previous meetings. This was in response to a law passed during the past legislative session, asking our agency, or not asking, telling our agency to do a risk assessment for allowing dairy animals back into the El Paso area. So most of you know that we had a long running battle with tuberculosis in dairies in El Paso. There were about 10 dairies that we had off and on under quarantine for 15 years. We just couldn't, we might get the dairy cleaned up and released, but on the post-quarantine test, we'd find a lesion animal or two to get back into the game with those dairies. So there's a lot of government money and industry money spent on that tuberculosis problem there. So a decision was made at the state level and national level as well to buy out those dairies. So those 10 affected dairies were bought out with government money that was between 2003 and 2005. So, and the commission took action then to also prevent any dairies from reestablishing that area by putting up a movement restriction zone in parts of El Paso County and Hudspeth County. So that restriction, that movement restriction zone, is still on the books now, and we're being asked to consider either shrinking that zone or removing that zone. So, and as part of that study, we've got to consider not only what's in that zone now, do we have TB there now, but what is right across the border in Mexico. So part of my task in putting together this risk assessment is to gather information from Mexico, from the state of Chihuahua, on the number of TB cases they have there and how close they are to the border, and incorporate that into that risk assessment. And then we explain what we're doing with tuberculosis eradication on the U.S. side. And as Dr. Ellis said, we've gone out and have our testing phase of the study underway now. So in my report, I put some specific numbers there. We're in this high-risk zone. We're testing primarily the cattle, but also bison and deer and a percentage of the goats. And to me, these are the most susceptible species, and so we'd like to test those. We didn't get into some of the camelids and some of the other species, or swine, because of the TB test. They're just not reliable on the species. So, as Dr. Ellis said, we sent out crews of state and federal employees. They did an excellent job of finding these cattle, these livestock to test and do the testing. You can see that all the dairy cattle have been tested. The beef cattle, it doesn't look like that many, 369 head, but those are, you have to put it in perspective. Some of those are one and two animal herds, and so on 60 different premises, we TB tested animals. So that means lining them up, going out, injecting them, and then come back 3 days later to read the test. So it's quite a bit of labor there, and most of the individuals didn't have working facilities, any way to restrain those animals. So we had crews going around with panels full of trailers and squeeze chutes behind them and going around and testing 1 or 2 animals at a time to get these numbers. We have 2 beef herds left. One of them is a very sizable herd, over 500 head. They moved some of those cattle in after we actually started the testing, but we're working with that producer to get those tested in the next month. And
He doesn't have pens either.
no,
And how big is that place?
500 head.
But how big is the property?
24 sections.
Good.
Yeah.
No pins?
And he wants,
pins.
yeah,
Gotta come out of there sometime.
And he's out of state. He's an individual from Montana, so
Right.
someone here in El Paso is watching the cattle. So
Right.
kind of caught in that, where we're taking the, you know, the OK Corral is one of the, maybe 2 OK Corrals and probably 30 panels out there that set up, you know, in to get these things tested. So it's a lot of agency resources going into this, but we're working with those producers as much as we can.
I have a question. I was very familiar with that situation. I was first on the commission at that time. And we had dairies down there that would have a 6-year-old dairy cow test positive for TB and had been tested on a yearly basis, sometimes twice a year. The employees were tested. There were no fence line contact with Mexican feeder cattle. There was, the only thing was close proximity to Mexican dairy herds with a high prevalence of TB. So has there been any research done, or are we going to be able to find out what the prevalence is in the Mexican dairies and maybe what caused some of these cows 10, 15 years ago to come up with TB when they had no exposure that we know of? How do you, I mean, to me, that's
what he's supposed, that's his report.
That's your report. But
That's what I'm
are you going to be, I know. So
You're exactly right. I mean, that there was so to go, part of that question, are we going to be able to assess what's in Mexico? And we've got to rely on what they tell us. I mean, you know, several of us have been on those reviews, and some of what it's always sugar-coated a bit of what they tell us.
Mm-hmm.
But we've got to, you know, take that. You will, as a commission, will have a chance to try to say, you know, do we really believe what they told me or not, you know, on that. But there are, the fact of the matter is, even the locals say there are fewer dairies on the Mexico side. They've gone out of business, and some of them, you know, because of border violence or just not enough water or you know, the economies of milk. So we think there really are fewer dairies, but there's still some there. But I've got some numbers from you that I got through USDA for Mexico and their prevalence and their testing and slaughter surveillance and that. So I'll be able to put that in a report and give an assessment. Now, your other question about how we were getting TB before, that was a puzzle. I mean, that the genetic fingerprint of those organisms on the Texas side matched what was on the Mexico side. At least 3 of them did. So we know there was some, you know, some movement there. But there was a study from 1995 to 1997 trying to figure out how that we were getting TB across the river. And as you said, the dairy workers were tested, the water, the air, the birds, the mammals, you know, a lot of coyotes, over 100 coyotes were shot and sampled for TB, and no TB was found anywhere except in the dairy. So we really don't know how it was getting across, but I suspect it was animal movement over the years, you know, legal or illegal, and then a relatively poor test. You know, we're talking about 65 or 70% sensitivity. So you miss some of those infected animals. If you're looking at a 2,000 or 3,000 head dairy, you know, that might only have 1% infection, and you miss, you know, 2 out of 10 of those. You know, so it's just kind of a combination of things. So the difficulty in my mind is the risk is probably lower now, but it's not zero.
So with that, you're going to put that in your assessment probably of that, I mean,
Yeah.
those issues that
I'll
were
try to
unresolved.
capture all that, yes, and explain what we're doing. I mean, Dr. Ellis went on a TB review in Mexico, and in California just recently, and they've had 11 infected herds in 11 years, and almost all of I think it's 6 different genotypes of organisms. They're not the same bug, you know, scattering around. So there's some problems on the U.S. side already. So how do you weigh that against what's going on in El Paso?
So that report, when you finish it, goes to the legislature. Did they make a decision, or what occurs after that?
I'll turn it to Dr. Ellis, and he'll, you know, approve it or not, or we'll change it, and then you as a commission will get a chance to see it.
Then it'll go to the legislature.
Well, my understanding is their intent is just to have the report done. The decisions about rules will come from y'all, based upon the recommendation from Andy and myself, what he finds. So the legislature, I don't see them taking any more action on this other than they wanted the report, and they want y'all to see the report, and y'all to deliberate if anything needs to be changed. And that's what I said in my report, is I suspect we will probably recommend a modification of the zone to a smaller area, but it's not a zero risk. And I mean, everything y'all do in the cattle industry, there's a risk of TB. What's acceptable and what's not, there's no right or wrong answer. A lot of it is what do your trade partners perceive But I suspect, based on the fact we hadn't found any TB yet, these cattle we got left are low risk. They're 30 miles from the river and the desert. They're not, if we find TB there, it's probably not even related to Mexico because they came from New Mexico. But I think you'll see a report that says we think just exactly what Andy said. There's some risk. It's not as big as it was because some things are better. We don't believe the zone should be completely destroyed, but it should be made smaller right along the river. That's probably what you're going to see next time.
But there won't be any federal funds to indemnify
No, that's over.
anything if a dairy was put in, if
No.
we had another problem.
But there's a dairy a month moving to Texas right now. They're just going to panhandles. El Paso, to me, geographically, if you say the risk in Mexico is less, which we know it is, mainly because a lot of those guys went out of business, then it's just what's the risk in general? And would they even go back to El Paso? I think you'll see some industry there, calf ranches maybe and some things. But I think I predict that based upon what Andy and I already know is that we will come back through Commissioner Balma, obviously, is the lead on this for y'all to consider a proposal to make the zone smaller.
Okay.
That's my best guess.
Those herds in California, the dairy herds that are infected, they're similar situation on the border near Mexico, or cut it up and
They're
down?
kind of in the central, most of them are in the Chino Valley, the Central Valley area where they have a lot of the highest concentration of dairies. Is that correct?
Yeah, they've got 2 in San Diego, but the rest are in Central California. That's not geographic. The dairy industry in the United States has some issues that they need to work through. And truthfully, my guess on California, their issue is they got more dairy cattle than everyone else. So it's just a game. It's a numbers game. You know, if you had that many dairy cattle in Indiana, they would have the problem, but it's in California. So it's really not related. Mexico is one of about 5 reasons, but not the only reason.
Out of that TB-affected dairy, the last dairy we had, it's been, 4 years ago now, the animals out of that dairy went to 13 different states. I mean, the industry moves a lot of animals around, so they trade diseases that way. So we got two lots of heifers out of one of those TB-infected dairies in California that were in Texas at heifer growers, and but excellent ID, electronic CVIs. We had those RFID, and then went straight to those animals and pulled those out, and were able to deal with them separately. So ID traceability worked great in that case. You know, we found those 2 lots of about 80 head in one and about 110 in the other. So we're able to eliminate that risk because of the ID and traceability. But I think it's a national. I think other probably dairies in the east have TB and they just haven't found it. I think but anyway, so great discussion on TB. So I'll move on to trichomoniasis. Dr. Ellis covered it quite a bit, so I'll just say that so far this year, 276 positive bulls have been found and about 9,000 tested. Just the raw percentage seems to be up a bit, and we talked about that some at the TRIC working group meeting. Those positive bulls were on 36 different premises, and in each case we do, Dr. Lansford's field staff who does an investigation and talks to those owners and make sure those bulls get tested twice for that first release. Moving on to swine, just briefly, we've had 1 brucellosis and 1 pseudorabies infected herd so far this year, and I think that will continue with those diseases in the feral swine population. Equine Plasmosis, we've already mentioned that we've had 3 new infected horses in calendar year 2014, and all of them were quarter horse race horses found through the requirement to enter the track. So I think from that, we talked earlier about the working group meeting outcome from that. So since we first had the first case of equine plasmosis in 2009, we found approximately 75 animals that are the racehorse quarter horses, that are outside that ranch investigation. So it is a significant problem still. Equine infectious anemia, we've had a couple positives this year. The numbers, tend to be 5 to 6 to 7 per year out of about 100,000 animals tested. So no new outbreaks there. I'm going to spend a few minutes on cervix, talking about chronic wasting disease. Dr. Ellis has already mentioned the surveillance effort that was we've done in the last hunting season. I think some of you might have seen our people on the side of the road collecting samples there with Texas Parks and Wildlife personnel. They got almost 300 samples this year, and all of them were CWD test negative. So about halfway through the hunting season, we realized we were missing an opportunity to get TB surveillance on these same animals. And so the same tissues, the same lymph nodes, they were collected along with the OBEX for CWD testing. But those same lymph nodes are a good tissue to look at for tuberculosis. And so we tacked on that effort and got TBMDL to look for TB in those tissues that were already being sent to them for CWD testing. And we got 43 animals, tissues from 43 animals tested that way. Talk for a couple minutes on federal CWD rules and standards. USDA published a CWD interim final rule in 2012, and that rule basically laid out the herd certification program and laid out interstate movement requirements. So that was an interim rule in 2012. They took comments on it, and just last month, in April of this year, they made that final rule with just some very minor tweaks to it. They added a definition of what an approved slaughter plant was, and they changed the part that talked about a herd plan to say it had to control CWD rather than eradicate it, because that was a major shift from the USDA side and from eradicating CWD to just controlling it. So that we saw that interim final rule become final rule last month. And then yesterday I saw the announcement from Avis that the CWD program standards are now finalized. So that standards were originally published in 2012 when the rule came out, and basically the rule is in the Code of Federal Regulations. The standard are guidelines on how to implement those rules, and those standards had a lot of controversial information. I think Commissioner Oates, we had a meeting about this, talked about what kind of comments we wanted to have, and USDA received 328 comments on those standards, and they made 4 minor changes to it and adopted it. So
We didn't have a lot of input,
we didn't have a lot of influence on them. I think they probably got comments from all over the board. They were proponents of the deer breeding and movement, and opponents of it on that, and all the way in between. So they got comments from all over the field, and we submitted some from the Animal Health Commission as well. So those revised program standards were dated May 2012, and they're effective immediately. So that means that the test age is still 12 months. We still have to submit 2 tissues for CWD testing, the OBEX and retropharyngeal lymph nodes, and the other fencing requirements are still in those standards. So moving on to poultry. We've had a lot of issues, as our commissioner is aware of, a lot of issues with infectious laryngotracheitis in commercial poultry this year, and it's not just a Texas issue. It's in southeastern Oklahoma, southwestern Arkansas, and all the way over to Georgia. There's been a big problem with this viral disease of poultry, and basically is serious enough that it can kill poultry in significant numbers. So since mid-February of this year, there have been 8 commercial broiler operations that have been diagnosed with LT. All of them were by the same integrator, and all of them are up in our region 4, up in northeast Texas. We've recently found had an egg flock, a laying flock that diagnosed with LT, and it's in our region 7. So with the broiler flocks, those have all been old enough birds that they can just take them to market sooner, so there's not a huge loss there. With this laying flock, those birds stay around for over a year, so we've worked out a plan with them so that they can market their eggs and try to put in the biosecurity plan so they don't spread it to the other houses or any of the farms. So we're working together with that producer. Avian influenza, fortunately, we have had a couple test positives at live bird markets, but they've been non-notifiable avian influenza, so it's not the H5 or H7 that we have to report to the international trade markets and panels. So we work through those issues. Finishing up my report with animal disease traceability activities. We continue to distribute ear tags. Most of those ear tags are the metal ear tags, the bright metal ear tags that you're familiar with to identify cattle, but we've also given out some RFID to producers. So far this year, we've given out over 200,000 tags and to owners of cattle, sheep, goats, swine, and captive service. You heard Dr. Ellis mention the approved tagging facilities. That's a facility that can receive untagged animals and put tags in them as long as they keep the proper records. And all of our personnel, I said we're continuing meeting. Dr. Ellis said we're done with that. So I guess Dr. Lansford, you've done your job. All your guys got those visits done with the livestock markets and feed yards and slaughter plants in there. So to date, there's 78 livestock markets and 10 feed yards and a buying station that have signed those voluntary agreements to be approved tagging facilities. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, I'll conclude my report. Take any questions?
Any questions? Thank you. We will skip, as Dr. Ellis mentioned, Dr. Varner is not available, so we'll go straight to Commissioner Simmons with the Audit Subcommittee report, item 7.
This was, I think Carol said, the fastest meeting we ever had in my 10 or 11 years on the audit committee. It was quick. Item 3 on it was the audit of the budgeting process. There were no issues, just nothing they found at all, so that was very good. The only thing that we had was, took any time, was there was supposed to, in the plan, we were supposed to do a travel audit. But then the agency was notified that the state was going to do an audit. So what we did was amended the plan, and we're going to do the emergency disaster plan. So instead of the travel, so it was redundant in what we were doing with the travel. So that was the only thing that we made any changes to. So with
That's it.
that was it.
That's quick. Do I have a motion to approve the Audit Subcommittee's report?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the audit subcommittee report as discussed today.
It's been moved and seconded. We approve the Audit Subcommittee report. Is there any discussion? If none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And that moves us to item 8. Bonnie will give us a report on some of the communications initiatives that she has underway. Bonnie, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you. Well, esteemed Chairman and Commissioners, good morning. As Chairman Morales said, this morning I'd like to share with you some of the agency's communication department outreach initiatives. It's been nothing short of a busy couple months. So with that said, I'd like to first bring you up to speed with some of our hot off the press news releases. First off, I do want to apologize. I just realized as I'm going through the commission book, I was like, I know there's been more news releases than that. Well, I left off like 3, so I do apologize for that beforehand. But in either case, we have lots of valuable information since the last commission that we've had to share with the public. They range anywhere from an array of topics from introducing new veterinarians to the rules that were adopted at the last meeting, some biosecurity education and awareness that we did for the public. And one thing, I don't want to steal anybody's thunder, so I'm not sure if Dr. Lansford's going to talk about it, but one of the things we got a lot of media attention about was the Horseback emergency response team that the Animal Health Commission, we received an award for, or from the Emergency Management Association of Texas. So we got a lot of good feedback on that. Dr. Ellis did several interviews on that, and we got picked up by several outlets, so we're excited about that. But in either case, lots of news releases. They're all available in your commission book, and as always, they're also available online for you. Secondly, I'd like to briefly highlight on just some of our exhibit participation. I know every time I talk about what we've done with our exhibits, I always emphasize that it's important for us to be a part of our stakeholders' conferences, conventions, meetings, whether it's us speaking or having a presence as far as like an exhibit. So we've had lots of those since the last commission meeting. There's some listed in your commission book, but I'm just going to highlight some of the key ones. We've had several several emergency management exhibits. Currently, as we speak, we have the Texas Department of Emergency Management Conference going on at the Henry B. Convention Center. That is a slew of TAHC employees ranging from central office to field inspectors to management, and they're doing kind of killing two birds with one stone. We have some manning the booth, and then we have others also attending courses and conferences going on throughout the convention. We attended TSCRA, Texas Southwestern Cattle Raisers Association, in April at the Henry B. Convention Center. Region 5 was the region that manned that booth. We did a local ICA county show back in February, and Region 7 was the one who headed up that. We will be participating in June at the annual ICA convention in Beaumont. And with that said, too, we have several more emergency management exhibits that we'll be doing statewide. So you'll hear about those in the next commission meeting. Moving on to our monthly Farm Bureau News and Views initiatives. In February, Dr. Ellis interviewed with Tom Nicoletti about PEDV, which is porcine epidemic diarrhea. I think he talked about that already. Dr. Swartz in March, he wasn't here, talked about the recently adopted rules after the past commission meeting. And then just this recently, at the end of April, Russell Easelt, who is the director of program records and animal disease traceability, he gave some updates and highlights as just education and awareness about what's going on with ADT. And all of those radio interviews, you can find them on y'all's local Farm Bureau radio network, and they're also available online. So, next, I'd kind of like to brag a little bit about our social media campaign. We just continue growing, and it just completely blows my mind, but it reiterates that what we're doing, it's in the right step, and what we're doing as far as education, awareness, and outreach. We finally broke the 4,000 mark on Facebook. We have, actually, yesterday when I left, it was at 4,020, and this morning when I just looked, it's 4,022. So in just, less than 24 hours, we grew by 2. But anyway, so Facebook, we broke that 4,000 mark. We're really excited about that. Twitter, we're almost at 700. We're kind of just trailing behind, but we're at 692. The one that I'm really surprised about is LinkedIn, which is more of a professional, in my opinion, more of a professional platform for the agency and announcing what the agency is and when we have different vacancies available and employment opportunities available to the public. And we're up to 280 followers on that. So that's a significant jump from the last time that we were here. So now something a little kind of off topic, but I thought it'd be something to spice things up and just to show you how influential social media is to our agency communication plan. I thought I'd share with you guys some of the interesting social media stats just real quick. Facebook itself, which is our biggest platform on social media, has over 1.15 billion users. On average, us Americans, any one of us in here, I don't know, I might say I'm guilty. I'm not really sure. But spend 16 minutes each hour on a social media site. And that could be Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Tumblr, Instagram, Pinterest, whatever it may be. But 16 minutes each hour. So I thought that was pretty significant. And then 23% of Facebook users log in at least 5 times a day. I'm going to say, yeah, I'm definitely guilty of that one. So, but in either case, social media is very influential, and like I said, it's working. It solidifies our outreach plan using these social media platforms. Some of the interactions that we have on our Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn are on y'all's commission books. If at any point you guys have some ideas of what we can post on there, please pick up the phone, email me, text me, whatever. I'm all ears. Chairman Wallace is probably going to hate me, all of y'all are, but I just took a picture earlier and I reposted it on Facebook, so kind of dodged a bullet there, but so yeah, it's instant, it's viral, and it goes a long way. But in closing, I'd like to add that at the end of January, right? Yeah, January, we had a department resignation, so that left a vacancy for a communication specialist. I'm really excited and pleased to announce that we have hired Ms. Callie McNulty. She's a recent graduate of Texas A&M. She actually just graduated Saturday. So she majored in ag communications and journalism. Her journey here with TAHC will start June 2nd, a few days before my birthday, so a birthday present for me. But anyway, I'm excited to introduce Callie at the next commission meeting to you guys. And that's all that I have, and that concludes my report. If you all have any questions, I'm all ears.
I'm so glad you know all this stuff. I'm old school. And you're doing a wonderful job.
Thank you.
And I hired a young man to drive a tractor, and I told him, no phone calls when you're driving this tractor. You stop. And all day long I had to watch him stop that tractor. Well, my wife is a Facebooker. And I said, that blank Tyler keeps stopping this tractor to talk on the phone. She says, no, he's on Facebook right now. So.
Hey, he did what you told him to do.
You know,
That's funny.
I don't really know that if we really realize the impact that the electronic media has on what goes on at this commission office. So it's tremendous.
It's amazing. And
It's crazy. Yep.
like I say, we're happy to have you.
Thank you, appreciate that. No questions, that concludes my report.
Thank you,
guys
Bonnie.
for your time. We'll talk to you all at the next commission meeting.
Okay, Dr. Hughes Garza, please, good morning. Give us the laboratory report. Update.
Good morning,
Good
everyone.
morning.
Good to see everyone again. You'll find my report on item 9, I believe. Fairly brief today, and full of pretty much good news as far as I'm concerned. So, the first item is, I talked with you last time about our adventure moving our lab to a new location, and we are in. We've been in our new building for about 6 weeks now. We're very pleased with it. It was, like I said, quite an adventure getting there, but we're all moved in. We're pretty much unpacked mostly, but I have to say, I have nothing but good things to say about our new property manager and the construction contractor that they had do our remodel. John Construction is a local company here, and we were on a pretty short timeline because our lease was up at the old place, and we had some starts and stops with previous places we were looking to move, and so we kind of didn't have a lot of time to do this. And the space that we moved into had been a combination of offices and a lab, but they basically more or less gutted the whole interior of the site and rebuilt it for us to the floor plan that we designed. And so, to give you an idea, we didn't get our actual construction permit from the city of Austin until February 19th, and we had our certificate of occupancy on March 26th. So, I think they did a really good job. So, and they've been great about following up with stuff that we've, issues that have come up as we've moved in. So we're in. I know we've had some challenges with our phones at the new place, and I apologize to anyone who tried to call the lab and couldn't get us. There's been a couple of, it's kind of been up and down with the service for whatever reason, but I think we're kind of leveled out now. We haven't had any real recent problems, so hopefully that's all settled. We did have to change our phone number and our fax number, and so we've been trying to make sure everybody has all of our new contact information. Hopefully we've gotten the word out about that now. So basically that's it. I do want to thank personally a couple of people, because this was a big endeavor to move, and not only to move the whole lab, but to do it in a relatively quick amount of time. We basically shut down our testing on a Thursday. We finished packing up on Friday. We had the movers come Saturday. We set up the new lab on Monday, and we were testing samples on Tuesday. So that takes a lot of people and a lot of hard work. So Ray Molina, who's a supervisor over at our lab, did an outstanding job at keeping everything, all the little details straight, and all the lab employees, and Larissa Schmidt here in our office had the monumental job of supervising 3 departments probably that were really critical to our move: our IT department, staff services, and our purchasing and finance departments. They all had big parts of this, so I really appreciate everybody's work on that. So, right around the same time we moved, we had Lance Brockman, who was a microbiologist in our lab. He had 29 years of service, and he retired in April, so we wish him the best. I hear he's actually gone to work for the IRS, so feel bad for him on that front, but we tend to keep our employees at the lab for quite a long time, so it's actually not unusual for us to have people who've been there 20, 30 years, but we always hate to see somebody go that's been there that long. So, but on the bright side, that allows us to get some new people in, and we're excited to have some new hires. Lauren Wyrick is our new administrative assistant, and she actually just started yesterday. She's helping us a lot with reporting requirements. We have a lot of monthly and quarterly reports that we have to do for USDA, for the National Veterinary Services Lab, for our own internal use, those kinds of things. So that's going to be kind of her focus, and then just general administrative work. And she comes to us from a medical records background, working in human medicine. So we're excited to have her. And then Nathan Kitchline is going to be replacing Lance as a microbiologist, and his primary test is going to be the FTA test for brucellosis. But because we have a small staff, we tend to cross-train everybody, so he's going to be getting trained on lots of our testing. And he has been a veterinary technician for a long time and has a good, solid lab background, so we're excited to have him. And then we've interviewed for a lab technician position, which we hope to offer to someone this week. So I feel like that'll actually get us pretty fully staffed. The new lab tech is actually replacing 2 people because we used to have a USDA employee that position is no longer funded by USDA, and then we had another employee that retired that we had not rehired. So basically bringing this person in to replace those 2. I'll take any questions.
Great. Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good work. Dr. Lansford will give us an update on emergency management. Good morning, Dr. Lansford.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. Thanks for the opportunity to provide some brief updates in the Emergency Management Department. In your books there under tab 10 is some more detailed listing of some activities that have been going on, so I'm going to hit the highlights and go on. Bonnie did steal a little bit of thunder. I was going to recognize that in your pamphlets in the front cover is a booklet from the Texas Emergency Management Association award for the horseback responder team. So I think Carol did a great job tabbing that with a purple tab so you can see that. And I'll leave that there. So since the last commission meeting, we've had the opportunity to fill a couple of the vacant positions in the Emergency Management Department. One of those is the Director of Emergency Management. Jeff Turner, who was previously the Assistant Director, is taking that position. We've also filled a planner position with Ms. Dee Harrison, and we're fortunate to have her. She comes from a lot of experience with planning and emergency management with several agencies and different jurisdictions across the state, and also has just a wealth of emergency management contacts. In fact, you'll see that she's one of the directors in the Emergency Managers Association, so she's got a lot of contacts that she brings with her. Taking advantage of her capabilities, we've been very busy in emergency management, revising and reviewing a lot of the plans, both disease and non-disease response plans. One of those that I'll point out is the Animal Response Plan. This is the overall big state level animal response plan. Of course, the Texas Animal Health Commission is the lead state agency for animal issues and disasters, so we're taking the lead in looking at the pieces and the parts of this plan to make sure that the other state agencies that we work with and our industry partners are involved to make sure we haven't missed anything on that and make sure it's updated. More specifically to disease, we are in the process of looking at the Foreign and Emerging Animal Disease Plan. That's the FIAD plan. Again, Texas Animal Health Commission is the lead agency on that, but we are working jointly with USDA Veterinary Services to identify parts of that plan that need to be updated. The next part of that task will be to engage our industry partners and other government agencies and non-government organizations as appropriate to get that plan updated. So, also related to the FIAD plan, our emergency management staff is involved with SADRA, which is Southern Animal Southern Agriculture and Animal Disaster Response Alliance. I can't believe I got that spit out. But anyway, it's a 15-state, 15 multiple state, I'll get spit out, 15 states that represent the Sadra Alliance, and we're working with them to come up with a plan that will address FIADs when they occur across state lines, which most certainly they probably will. So that's an important piece. Bonnie did a good job talking about a lot of the conferences, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about that, but one of the most important things that I want to point out about our involvement and participation in these conferences is it gives us, our staff, not just emergency management, but staff all across the agency, an opportunity to interact with emergency managers from the state level down to the local level. It also gives us an opportunity to tell people, emergency management folks, what our capabilities are in response. And so anytime we can do that, it's time well spent, in my opinion. So we're actively doing that. Just a reminder, hurricane season starts in just a little over 2 weeks, so tis the season. In terms of exercises, we do have a couple of exercises coming up. One of the big ones is the Texas Department of Emergency Management exercise showcase in League City, there just south of Houston. The big part of that exercise is it gives us a chance to exercise our logistics in getting people and equipment moved and set up somewhere in a response type situation. And last but not least, we have a horseback emergency response team exercise scheduled for the last week, or almost the last week of June, down in scenic Zapata, Texas.
In June?
In June. Absolutely wanted to get down there while it was cool. It says it's a week-long exercise. Again, the point of that exercise is we're practicing our logistics, trying to get everybody lined up to be able to get our personnel, their equine partners, and the equipment moved successfully to a location and then be able to respond to whatever the situation is. So it says it's a week long. It's already underway. 2 weeks ago, all the supervising inspectors were sitting in the hall at the embassy suites planning and cussing and discussing, probably cussing me mostly because it's in Zapata, but it's a good spot. So with that, any questions or comments?
We've got our Region 1 folks who are involved with the
yes.
fire and Panhandle right now. We've got people on the ground at some fires.
Yeah, we have had a couple of responses, and thank you for the reminder. So we've got some folks in Region 1 right now in Hutchinson County. We had a livestock inspector up in Fort Worth area respond to a truck wreck. He heard about it on the radio, and so he took his first responder role seriously and took it upon himself to go there. In fact, he followed a DPS cruiser into that situation, and they were glad he was there to help sort out the situation.
Cattle truck.
Cattle truck, yeah. So there was that. And I think that's, for the most part, it right now. So.
Any questions or comments for Dr. Lansford? Thank you. Mr. Luna will give us a administration budget status report. Good morning.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Commissioner. Basically, we've got 3.5 months left in the fiscal year. We're rolling along just about how we planned. Again, this fiscal year, we were appropriated $8 million in general revenue. And like I said, with 3.5 months left to go, we're fixing to start into the next fiscal year. We've been appropriated $8.1 million. Federal funds and grant revenue and then just so you understand, the state fiscal year runs from September 1st through August 31st, and then the federal fiscal year, federal cooperative fiscal years run from April 1st through March 31st. So they bisect, and they sometimes cause headaches for us back there in finance. But for state fiscal year 2014, we had a total of $2.1 million available for the agency, and we had just over $100,000 in grants. We anticipate for fiscal year federal fiscal year 14, which would be applied for our state fiscal year next year, 2015, we anticipate approximately 1.6 million. There might be some grant money out there, but we usually don't know until somebody comes and talks to us. So we don't plan on it until we find out more about it. Capital budget, we have been appropriated capital budget each year of the biennium. It's and that money comes out of the general revenue total, that $8 million. For 14 and 15, we've been capital budget is 150 grand for trucks or fleet maintenance, or renewing the fleet, the truck fleet that we have, and the other 150 grand is for technology refresh and system renewals for licensing and software and all that stuff. I can tell you for this year, all capital budget has been allocated. And for next year, we're going to pretty much allocate it all again, basically just for doing, because everything in these two categories have a shelf life. And to keep saving the agency money, the state money, we do have to go out and make these big purchases to allow us continual usage, up-to-date usage, and efficient usage. Any money that we do not have left, any money we have left over at the end of the fiscal year, we have the authority to roll forward to utilize next year. That is not the case next year. At the end of next year, we have to have everything spent, and we're pretty good at doing that. So I'm not worried about that. Fee revenue, we estimate approximately 722 grand in fee revenue to be collected this fiscal year. Our portion would come to about 456,000. As of yesterday, the total fee revenue comes to just over 500 grand, approximately 69, almost 70% of what we estimate. 379,000 of it has come to the agency, and 123,000 has been passed on to the state per the GAA and their regulations, how they set it up for us. Full-time FTEs, we call them FTEs, full-time equivalencies. That's what employees are. That's how the state classifies employees. We're appropriated 161 for both years. At the end of, I estimate by the end of the year, we're going to have 153. And just to give you a reference, I looked at where we stood in the first quarter of 2013, so about October or so of 2013, and we were, 2012, and there's a 24% increase. We were at 123, and by the end of this year, we should be up to about 153 or so. And so it's a 24% increase. So like Dr. Ellis said, we are increasing. We are trying to get back to where we were, those pre-rough year levels. And that is all I have. Is there any questions for me, sir?
I'll throw in a couple of comments here. Good job, Stephen. A couple of things just to comment on is that our budget's in pretty good shape. Actually, we're in good shape because although we were funded for these employees, we haven't hired yet. So we've got some extra money there as we get closer, it'll get tighter next year. But we actually, our budget for this biennium is fine. The second thing is just mention it in advance of the next meeting and the development of our LAR. The authority to keep the fees that he mentioned will expire. And it ends into this biennium. So if the agency and the stakeholders who support the agency wish to see us continue to be able to keep the funds that we get from fees, health certificates, certification, inspections, etc., that will be a legislative action. In other words, if the legislature does it through a rider or through however they would do it, if they don't deem to continue that, we would lose that money, which would be 4%. It would be a 4% reduction unless external factors to help decide to keep that. And obviously, we would like to keep the fee revenue we're getting. We're not sure we need any more than that, to be honest. But that's a decision that'll need to be made politically.
Would that be a request to LAR? Would that be?
Yeah. How would that? Tell them how that would work exactly. Well, it could be an extra. It could be a. Go ahead.
Well, actually, it's going to have to be repassed through the House and Senate, so it's going to have to be re-proposed legislation. Because technically, when we go do the LAR, we're going to have to act as though it doesn't exist, because it expires the August 31st of 2015.
So it would have to be a special item.
Correct. We were going to request it on the LAR because theoretically it expires, but we also have to get legislative approval, and it has to be passed through the House and all that stuff.
I think that would be something we as commissioners can go to our stakeholders and maybe formulate something from that end, rather than a request from us to have it taken care of maybe before
Absolutely,
that.
it's not appropriate. I'm just raising the point to you guys.
Sure.
This part of our budget will expire unless somebody deems that it should.
And Dr. Ellis and I have spoken about this and are working on a game plan, and we'll work that out. I'm personally in favor of keeping it.
Does the health certificate seem
If
to
it
be
provides
going
a
up and
service.
the brucellosis testing, of course, going down? I mean, is there kind of a consistent
We
income?
actually are getting more money from the brucellosis testing than we thought we were going to get, but in general, you're probably right. Health certificates, what do we get off health certificates? 300. Probably 2/3 of our fees are from health certificates, to be quite honest. I'm just guessing off the top of my head.
I just think we need to be careful as an agency to request too many fees. I think you look at the cattle numbers where they are right now, and the attempt on a collection of fees prior and what that brought up. We're going to see more. We're going to see the state, I think, try to legislate us to collect more fees, and we have to, in my opinion, continue to tell our story that fees is a tough way to fund this agency. But if we have a fee structure that's already built in, that's working, I think we keep it. But we got to be careful.
They're only about 4% of our total budget.
Right.
So we're not being funded by them, but we would take a 4% budget.
But it costs us to provide the service, and I think we need to be reimbursed.
And the fees, almost 100% cover our fleet maintenance, not the purchase of our vehicles,
Right.
which is used capital budget, but the maintenance of fuel, any repairs, and all this type of stuff. It's almost 100% funded by the fees, and that's our guys going out to respond.
How often do we trade vehicles?
We tend to run them into ground. We try to milk all we can out of them. I think we have some 2005s, generally 250,000 miles or 300,000 miles. We do, the newer ones, the maintenance cost is very minimal. The older ones, we try to milk all we can out of it. We do have more maintenance costs for them, life expectancy and all that. I don't have all the information on the fleet management. I could get that information for you.
Let me help you out there. Generally, the higher mileage guys have the newer trucks, and so a truck, as it gets 150 or 200,000 miles, will be removed from a guy that lives in Van Horn, for example, and be given to someone who might live in Rockdale that's only driving 50-mile trips. And so before they're completely terminated, they get downgraded to someone that doesn't drive as far, that still could use the truck. And then so there's not a number, but when we evaluate that the maintenance and the repairs of the truck is more than the value to the agency, then they're deleted. But it's going to, I would have said 225,000, but 200, 250 is about where they run out. A lot of agencies just trade them in at 100,000 or whatever. But we value those trucks are of a value to us at 150, 200,000 miles. So as long as the vehicle is dependable, we keep using it. We just downgrade it to a lower traveled employee, if that makes sense.
Should you not include, or do you actually include fuel usage too in that? Because there's huge differences in that.
We do. I mean, we've got some lease vehicles too. It gets a little complex. We can be glad to provide y'all with more detail. We got some lease vehicles. We got some new ones. We got some old ones, and it is a cumulative decision. Fabian's sitting over there. He's our fleet manager, so he's wanting to say something, but he's in timeout in the corner. But we do. It is a cumulative decision that is made by management. When we buy new trucks, these are going out, and it's just bottom line is the value of the vehicle more than the liability or the cost, and when it's a wash, we get rid of it. And we have what now, 60?
Close to it.
But we still have employees that don't have vehicles. So we've got employees that are happy to get an old truck that's better than nothing. And so as long as that's still the case, we're going to, I'd like to see us bring it down to maybe 200,000 miles, but we really haven't had a lot of problems with people being stranded on the side of the road. But that's really the issue in Fabian and his group. When they look at it and go, it needs a transmission, that costs X thousands of dollars, and that's when we make the decision. And it's a joint decision basically between Dr. Lansford, who's the manager of our field staff, and Fabian, who's the fleet manager. They sit down together and they look at trucks every quarter and just make some calls. So.
Any other questions? Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the budget status report as discussed.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the administration budget status report. Any discussion? If none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Stephen. Larissa will give us consideration and possible action on agency contracts and purchases. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Beginning on page 1 of tab 12, I've listed all the purchases that we've made since our last commission meeting that fall between the $5,000 and $24,999 range. This morning, there's no action necessary on these. They're just listed for your review. But beginning on page 5 of tab 12 are the purchases, leases, and contracts that exceed $25,000, and these are up for your approval today. The second item on that list is a timely issue, I guess. It's about fleet vehicles, and it's for which we have the capital money granted authority for 2015. And the reason that's on here today is because we didn't know whether or not you would meet again before September 1st, and we want to get a handle on and start the process of trying to procure the fleet vehicles that we have money for. I will be happy to entertain any questions you have.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the contracts and purchases requests as discussed today.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the contracts and purchases requested today. Any discussion? If none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Now it's Gene. The floor is yours for a while.
Yes, sir. Well, we'll see how quickly we can get you through this.
Okay.
First and foremost, I'm starting off with these compliance report, which we've been doing the last couple times. So we're going to try to, in terms of information that you most like. First and foremost, what I'd like to do, though, is introduce our new investigator for the Animal Health Commission. As you remember from the last commission meeting, Richard Wagner having retired, and that is a big loss for the agency and for myself. That said, we seem to find amazing people to do the job for the agency. And in this case, I'd like to introduce Clint Sturrock. Clint actually comes to us from the Region 2 office. That said, he only worked there a year. He's from the Kirbyville, Jasper area. Did a fabulous job for us. But he had 22 years as the chief deputy with the Tyler County Sheriff's Department. So he brings some fabulous skill sets for us. He has got great instinct, wonderful personality, great demeanor. Him and Bob make one hell of a team, I'm telling you. They do a great job together in terms of that. They've been going around together right now working on cases around the state. So, Clint, I think, is going to do a fabulous job for us. I think you'll be well represented by him as an investigator for the Animal Health Commission. So I welcome Clint, and I'm very glad to have him on board. What I provide you is just trying to come up, and like I said, apologize, haven't been out for a while, trying to come up with information to give you a better idea of what's gone on compliance-wise and stuff, So this goes since the last commission meeting, in which case we've received 47 compliance action requests. Those are requests from our field offices requesting, documenting a violation, requesting something. Out of it, we sent 25 warning or pending letters. These tend to be for dairy ID, scraping tags, not having a TB or a CBI on out-of-state animals, EIA test or trig test. Also, 2 dealer demands where we're trying to trace out and get records regarding animals exposed in that, for which we have an administrative penalty that we'll get to in a minute. The investigators have done 19 investigations since then. Out of it, they filed 18 complaints. These are Class C misdemeanors. in that time. They were all for entry violations either involving cattle or equine, not having a CVA, certificate of veterinary inspection, or a TB test or an EIA test. We did follow one person we make note of because this was somebody from Louisiana, but he claims to be from Texas and stuff. So there was some animals that had gone through the market for which our inspectors were spot on, followed up and figured out that they'd actually been just sold in Louisiana the week ago. They were not Texas animals, so they needed to have a CVI to get here. And so they put that all together and filed. And it was actually, there was more than 6 animals, but we filed 6 complaints. So the total penalty was $3,402, which is full $500 per count, and court costs, which he paid immediately. May he send no more. That's my hope. So we'll see. Other than that, and like I say, from that, the next thing I have is I do have an administrative penalty resolving a dealer thing, and I don't know if you have any questions you want to ask me, anything you particularly would like me to see.
Move on if you're ready.
All right, well, let me bring you the next one. This is a administrative penalty that we had. It's for a gentleman named Blake Farmer. Mr. Farmer is a dealer. He is a dealer. He buys and sells cows quite a bit. He's showed up on regards to a trace regarding a TB steer, positive steer that had come back out of slaughter. And so he was not very easy to deal with. It was not very productive in what he produced. And so this literally was a situation where he just stopped helping give us records, which was not what we needed. We need him to be engaged in helping us. And so we worked out the administrative penalty, sent it to him. It was for the full $1,000. The penalties goes $1,000 per violation, I will say, based on the fact that he was a dealer. We also had a couple other demands that I will say this helped to free up getting information out of him on that. The other thing I will say in his behalf for everybody that is married to a good woman, the wife showed up and actually ended up helping us get what we needed and get this thing resolved, because he was not returning calls. We're sending him the letters. We noticed he's in violation. Buddy, the clock's clicking, and she finally stepped up to the plate and dealt with it. So, since it's a little after Mother's Day, we can always acknowledge the good women out there who help keep the men from wandering too far afield. So this is $1,000. And do you have any questions? Not an issue.
There's no questions. Could we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the agreed order for violations of commission rules by Blake Farmer as discussed today. Second.
Been moved and seconded. We approve the agreed order for violations of commission rules. Any discussion? None. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now we'll begin consideration of possible action on regulations. Gene, go ahead.
All right. The first one I bring you is Chapter 38, the Tuberculosis. As Dr. Ellis indicated, this comes in response to the work group, the trick work group that had assembled and talked through some of the issues that they felt needed to be addressed or fine-tuned in regards to the trick program. As Dr. Ellis indicated, one of the biggest changes that came out of this particular rule was the fact that now, if an animal shows up to be positive, we will trace back into the herd to actually have the animal's origin, the herd of origin tested, which now puts a more significant role in the control program, but probably will make a better dent in terms of trying to actually address and control this disease. The other thing was regarding the breeding bulls and stuff that were under a holdover, that they can become part of the management plan so as to actually ensure that they are participating in testing these things annually. As Dr. Ellis indicated too, the Plasmosis herd certification program is an important element for those that participate in ensuring that this disease is not part of their cattle units. And so as such, this also gives another opportunity for the program to present itself in a way that can be used by the cattle herd owners in terms of participating. And the last thing was on this too, also to make sure that those that participated in it, that they have adequate fencing under the stray laws, there's adequate fencing requirement that maintains you have to keep your animals on your property. And so using that, this will ensure that those that participate have adequate fences in order to maintain the quality for that. Any questions?
Holman, you good with the 30-day?
Absolutely.
Okay. I'll welcome a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we propose the amendments to Chapter 38, Trichomoniasis, located in Title 4 of the Texas Administrative Code as discussed today. I further move that notice of the proposed amendments be published in the Texas Register with a 30-day comment period.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. We approve item 15A, motion, Chapter 38, Trick. Is there any discussion? If none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item B.
All right, the next chapter I bring you is chapter 39. This is actually a brand new chapter, and then it's repealing the previous chapter. The previous chapter was scabies, which, as Dr. Ellis indicated, is dealing with mites. That chapter had been in place well prior to my arrival here, and I had never even had the opportunity to tinker with it, in the fact that it was not an issue that had come up in my 15 years here. That said, with the new trends in medicine, with the new techniques, with the issues coming up that we're starting to show up a little bit in some of the show animals and stuff, the chapter was rewritten to bring it into compliance or embracing the new medical technologies, the new treatment forms that we're offering. Also, too, to be a little broader in terms of ensuring capturing that. This is something, and I would like to acknowledge, I got to give a lot of credit to Mary and Sally. It's been, since I was out quite a bit, they really did, they're the ones that wrote up this. And so I think they did a tremendous effort. This chapter is actually replacing the previous chapter, and establishes the standards for how to handle infested and exposed animals, as well as how to handle any kind of quarantines and releases, as well as what the duty is of the owner or caretaker that has an animal that has exposure or is being infected by one of these mites.
Mr. Chairman, I move to propose a new Chapter 39 located in Title 4 of the Texas Administrative Code and repeal the existing Chapter 39 discussed today. And I further move that notice of the proposed new chapter be published in the Texas Register with a 30-day comment period.
Do I have a second?
Seconded.
Been moved and seconded. We approve item 15B, motion, Chapter 39, scabies and mange mites. Is there any further discussion? If none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. As of item C, we do have a request for public comment. What I'd like to do is have Gene present the proposal, and then we'll ask for public comment at that time. Gene, go ahead.
All right, Chairman, this is Chapter 45. This is our reportable disease chapter. This is where we'll provide for diseases that have to be reported to the agency, to the commission, once diagnosed or determined by a laboratory. This adds to it the novel swine enteric coronavirus disease. I know I messed that one up, but anyways, Dr. Ellis had indicated too that this is a breadth of diseases which have given a lot of concern and been disclosed lately throughout the United States, as well as USDA is also making this something reportable to them so that they can keep track of it. So what this is doing is just putting it out there that these type of diseases would be reported to the commission, and we would be aware and know what's going on, allow us to deal with it.
Okay. For proper parliamentary procedure, could I have a motion and a second?
Mr. Chairman, I move to propose the amendments, Chapter 45, reportable diseases, located in Title 4 of the Texas Administrative Code as discussed today. Further move that notice of the proposed amendments be published in the Texas Register with a 30-day comment period.
Second.
Second
Been
motion.
moved and seconded. We approve item 15C, Chapter 45, reportable diseases. We have here with us Brandon Gunn. As I understand, Brandon, you're new with the Texas Pork Producers?
Yes, sir.
Welcome, and Brandon would like to address this issue.
Good morning. We've had a good conversation with Dr. Ellis over this subject for the past few months, with USDA last month unveiling their plan to make this mandatory reporting. It's kind of put a lot of people in industry with a lot of questions, because USDA made the statement but didn't exactly follow it up with how they were going to work through the plan and what the intentions were. And while I do believe, and from us as an association standpoint, believe that the intentions behind this are good, because I am in favor of Dr. Ellis and Animal Health Commission having the authority, the authority to get the results from the diagnostic lab on where the virus is at and how prevalent it is. The only thing is as we look into, the law of unintended consequences and how some things could take place off of what were good intentions originally, and that's the only thing where we're at right now as we think about it, kind of proceed with caution, kind of exercise caution as we go forward with this. One big question would be as to what will happen with the information that's collected. And that's a question that we're a little unsure of right now. Second, the information collected will it be exempt from the Freedom of Information requirements. We just wouldn't want to get it out into the wrong hands. And I know Dr. Ellis and the commission has no desire for that to take place, but it seems that from previous experience that we've seen amongst a bunch of industries, that when rules get put into effect, somehow someone can take it a step further and some unintended consequences come from it. And that's one thing right now as we wait for USDA to come back again with their statement on how this plan is going to unfold. We're just kind of in the position of sit and wait right now and to slow down just a little bit. As we look at the mandatory reporting, and this is, and again, I still think there's a lot of good to it. In a way, it could be self-defeating, if you will, if producers are forced to report this disease through a government agency without knowing kind of what strings are attached or what's going to come of it. They might pull back and quit testing, which could defeat the purpose and increase the risk. And so that's why kind of our position from an association standpoint is to just kind of slow down and wait a second until we kind of see what USDA is going to unveil, which should be from all indicators that we have within the next week. But that's kind of what we have, and if there's any questions, be glad to answer, and anything that y'all have.
My experience with USDA a lot on their Avis and them giving deadlines and coming up with their take on issues, they're never on time. It could be next week, could be next year. What's the feeling of the Texas pork producers, which are, I guess, primarily show pigs and,
yes,
right?
Sir. And our association is kind of unique in terms of balancing it, where we have probably 99% of our membership are show pig producers, small town farms, whereas 99% of our production belongs in our commercial operations. And so that's where we find kind of the battle and coming to a common ground on it, and we're still kind of in that position of, not exactly coming forward and making a position, because I can say in terms of mandatory reporting to a government agency, that would, our commercial operations are not in favor of that, whatsoever, depending upon, what could result negatively from that.
Well, it's a proposal. We'll, if passed, we'll look for comments, and we're industry driven. I mean, that's what we're here for. But am I correct in assuming that our rep for the pork industry,
Commissioner Winter told me yesterday he's in favor of proposing the rule.
Proposing the rule.
That's all this is proposing the rule.
Exactly.
Also,
And I understand, and I'm totally in favor of proposing the rule.
Okay.
And us being in positioning ourselves, depending upon what USDA comes, to put ourselves ready for that. Just wanted to be able to state some of our concerns that we have right now.
Fantastic.
In complete agreement with where we're at.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks for your input.
Yeah.
Is there any other discussion? If none, all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, Commissioners, the last proposal that I bring you today is Chapter 51, which are entry requirements, for which it's doing two things. The first is it's making requirements regarding the trichomoniasis entry requirements. This, once again, is in response to the work group recommendations and proposals, where basically it's more clearly identifying what animals can come in that are 12 months age or older that can be exempt from the requirements. It's providing for those that are participating at fair shows and rodeos, as well as for those that are coming here in order to be fed out. And those that are going to a facility to be for fed conversion, a bull test station, provided that they maintain all the different standards to ensure that they're isolated and that they're not exposed to female cattle. Also, too, the other thing that this was doing was adding to the entry requirements under the swine section, that for non-commercial swine entering Texas for purposes of immediate slaughter, that they have originated from a premise not known to be affected by novel swine entry, coronavirus disease, and they have not been exposed to it in the last 30 days. This falls in line with the reported disease requirements, as well as ensuring that those animals coming in have not been exposed to it. Do you have any questions?
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we propose the amendments to Chapter 51, entry requirements, located in Title 4 of the Texas Administrative Code as discussed today. I further move that the notice of the proposed amendments be published in the Texas Register with a 30-day comment period.
Second. Been moved and seconded that we approve item 15D, motion Chapter 51, entry requirements. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Gene, before you start, 16, I'm under the understanding when Dr. Ellis's report that item A through D, which were proposed last meeting, there were no comment, no written comment. I've had no requests for public comment here today, so I'd recommend you stay brief on all 4 items and we'll go through them. Just a suggestion.
I got it. I can go. Excellent. Okay, the first one we have up for adoption is Chapter 43. This is in response to, this is with the authorized calf ranch program, the authorized grower facility, as well as it has the requirement in it for ensuring that any cattle originating from Mexico, that's disclosed on any documents issued by veterinarians. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the amendments to Chapter 43, Tuberculosis, located in the Title 4 of the Texas Administrative Code as discussed today.
Second. Been moved and seconded. We approve item 16A, Chapter 43, Tuberculosis. Any discussion? If none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
The next chapter I'm bringing for adoption is Chapter 49. This is on plasmosis. This was the identification requirement, ensuring that animals that were positive reactors for plasmosis, that they were identified in accordance with our rules. And so this is provided for those identification requirements. Any comments, questions?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the amendments in Chapter 49, Equine, located in Title 4 of the Texas Administrative Code as we discussed today.
Second. Been moved and seconded that we approve item 16B, Chapter 49, Equine. Any discussion?
I have one question. Are the area officers going to be carrying the equipment to identify those horses, or? I mean, I've got a lot of vets have that equipment as well.
Yeah, to answer your question, yes, we're going to talk. There's a number of these horses around the state that are infected, not identified. So we'll talk to the owner of the horses and give them their choice. You want to get your vet to do it, go ahead. If you don't want your vet to do it, we'll be glad to do it, but you got to choose one of those 2 things. So we'll give them their option. And so there'll be some basic training. Some of our regions are already doing it. We've got, of our 7 regions, 3 of our vets just came out of practice. They're already doing it. They had the equipment and knowledge. So some of our regions have already started this voluntarily. People just said, all right, come do it. But to answer your question, yes, sir. We will talk to those people and say, who do you want to do it? You can pick, or we'll come do it. And I did catch one thing here, Gene. I don't know, in the rule it says must be identified by an accredited vet. Shouldn't that say authorized vet? No, I mean, we've got an entire shouldn't they be authorized? That's the state designation, not the federal designation. And I don't know if you can change that now. The very last page.
Last paragraph
The
there.
first sentence of number 2, reactors must be identified by an accredited vet. Shouldn't that read authorized? That's our or is that too, or can we not change? If it's not doable, just go ahead.
So the authorized vet would be the area vet.
It would be a veterinarian
Well,
that's trained by us to do this.
Under the program, Plasmosis will be one of those programs.
An authorized vet is accredited and licensed by default.
Right, just like
So
in a
this-
brucellosis.
But this would be a vet that's come to us, we've trained them, we've talked to them about pyro, and they're in our system.
Well, based on that, I can incorporate this as a comment and make that.
I just raising the point, it's not a big deal, but it ought to be authorized.
Yeah, but prior to adoption, as long as there's a comment's been made. And so if they incorporate, if in your motion you incorporate as discussed today, I can make that change. So, I mean, the bottom line is with the accredited, that's where the standard started, and so that's why it was used.
Right, we didn't have authorized in place yet, but now we do.
So do we have a timeline on this? It's fixing to,
Well, as soon as y'all pass this and it goes into effect, we'll contact all the unidentified pyro reactors and give them a choice.
so interested veterinarians are gonna need to go to the area office and get authorized.
That's the whole point of
To be able
authorization.
to microchip these horses.
Well, if they're already if they're brucellosis approved, we're gonna grandfather them into authorized, but it will probably talk personally to a veterinarian who has a client that wants them to do it. We'll talk. That'll be our regional vet, Dr. Miller, Dr. Barton, or whoever will talk one-on-one with the
But it
vet.
can be done on a phone
Absolutely.
conversation, okay.
Absolutely.
So does the word need to be changed to authorized, or do we need just an amendment to the motion, including?
Well, the motion is discussed, I move that we adopt the amendments to the chapters discussed today, chapter 49.
Okay.
I can incorporate the
discussion.
in a comment, for which, and all it is making a correction to more properly reflect an authorized program that's now being put in place.
So the motion can stay as, okay.
And I
So,
just incorporate it and change that.
I'm probably gonna get some calls on this, if somebody has one, so.
Well, you're authorized if you're brucellosis approved. So it's, for the 2,000 that are brucellosis approved, this means nothing. But for the 1,000 accredited vets in the state of Texas not authorized, we want to talk to them before they do regulatory work in the state of Texas, and that's who this addresses, is the 1,000 that we don't believe are authorized, which means we've never talked to them about pyroplasmosis at all. And so that's really what this would amount to. That's the letters that are going to go out in August. So.
okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt amendments to Chapter 51, entry requirements located in Title 4 of the Texas Administrative Code as discussed today.
It's been moved and seconded. We approve item 16B, Chapter 49 Equine. Any discussion? Not all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
The next one I bring you is chapter 51. These are entry requirements. In this chapter, there were changes made. They were proposed to bring to remove the definition of waybill, which was something that we'd historically used, and use the ownership or statement, which is a new federal program. So it was cleaning up that, as well as it was requiring that, once again, any certificate or formal record issued by the accredited veterinarian that for cattle that originate from Mexico, that would be disclosed on it, so we're aware when they come in that they can review it and pick out excuse Mexico.
Chairman, I move that we adopt the amendments to Chapter 51, entry requirements located in Title 4 of the Texas Administrative Code as discussed today.
Second.
Been moved and seconded it. Second, that we approve item 16C, Chapter 51, entry requirements. Any further discussion? If none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
The last one I bring you is Chapter 54. This is our domestic and exotic fowl registration. This is specific to live bird marketing systems. Basically, what the requirement that was proposed up for adoption was just to make sure that these birds were properly confined. We did have one where they kept getting up in the trees and getting out. Or caused a little bit of problems, so this is, and making sure that it keeps the birds in the cage. So, which it has, that problem has been fixed. Anyway, with that, if you have any questions, I'll ask for your consideration.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the amendments to Chapter 54, Domestic and Exotic Fowl Registration, located in Title 4 of the Texas Administrative Code as discussed today.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve item 16D, Chapter 54, Domestic and Exotic Fowl Registration. Any further discussion? None, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, and we'll move to item 17.
These last two items, these are as we adopted at a previous commission meeting, the rule review process where we put out several chapters each time just to acknowledge, just to get any comments regarding the validity of the chapter, whether or not anything needs to be proposed or changed. In this case, the first one we went out with was our hearing and appeals procedures. We received no comments, and so with that, we'd ask that no changes as identified to the comments but necessary for review or to propose. And so with that, we ask that you just re-adopt all the sections in Chapter 4, Chapter 32 of our code.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the rule review of Chapter 32, hearing and appeal procedures as found in sections 32.1, 32.2, 32.5, and 32.6 located in Title 4 of the Texas Administrative Code as discussed today.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve item 17A, Chapter 32, hearing and appeal procedures. Is there any further discussion? None, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
The last one I bring is for Chapter 36. This rule review was for our exotic livestock and fowl requirements. Once again, there was no comments submitted, and as such, would ask that you would re-adopt the sections of Chapter 36.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the rule review of Chapter 36, Exotic Livestock and Fowl, as found in sections 36.1 and 36.2, located in Title 4 of the Texas Administrative Code, as discussed today.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. We approve item 17B, Chapter 36, Exotic Livestock and Fowl. Any discussion? If none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Gene, thank you very much. I have no other requests for public comment. We have talked about our recognition already. At this time, we would like to go into item 19, which is closed executive session to deliberate the appointment, employment, evaluation, reassignment, duties, discipline, or dismissal of the Commission's executive director as permitted by Section 551.074 of the Texas Government Code. We'll be brief, and we'll ask that the public please leave this room, and we'll reconvene session. I'm sorry about the delay. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve an increase of the executive director's salary today by the 2% as provided under the current State Appropriations Act and to be effective on September the 1st, 2014.
Second the motion.
Been moved and seconded. We approve item 20. Any discussion? I will say it's automatic on the other employees, correct? We have to have a motion for our executive director. Any other discussion? If none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Recognition of awards. We've already done that. So let's set a date for the 390th. When is USAHA this year?
It's in October.
October.
So we want to have a meeting prior. So we want to have a September meeting.
We like the 16th or the 23rd.
Let's run that by everybody when they get back to their office and poll everybody and see what works best.
Okay.
You say the 16th or the 23rd?
Yes, sir.
I'm out.
Ooh, the 23rd. Okay.
Works good for me. I mean, the meeting starts here the next day. But the 16th is good too.
The 16th is good? Okay. All right, we'll work on it and either pick one of those two,
Okay,
okay?
I'll let everybody know.
Okay, if there's no other business, I call this meeting adjourned. Thanks everybody for being here.